Around 250 million years ago, no, I wasn't around then, every continent on Earth was fused together into one gigantic landmass – Pangea. Then the planet began to tear itself apart. Massive tectonic plates slowly drifted away from each other. Oceans opened, and entire continents were reshaped. Scientists once believed these changes belonged to Earth's distant past. But now, researchers think they are watching the same process happen again, in real time beneath Africa. Deep below eastern and central Africa, the ground is slowly stretching and cracking apart. Scientists have known for years that the East African Rift System could eventually split the continent. But new discoveries suggest the breakup may already be much further along than anyone expected. One of the most important clues comes from eastern Africa, across regions including Kenya and Ethiopia. There, researchers studied a massive fracture zone called the Turkana Rift. This area sits inside the larger East African Rift System, a gigantic scar running roughly 4,000 miles from Jordan all the way down to Mozambique. The tectonic plates here are separating extremely slowly, only about 1/5 of an inch every year. That may sound insignificant, but over millions of years, it adds up to continental-scale destruction. To understand what's happening underground, scientists use seismic imaging, studying how sound waves bounce through deep layers of rock beneath the surface. What they found was startling. At the center of the rift, Earth's crust has become dramatically thinner than surrounding areas. In some places, it's only about 8 miles thick, compared to more than 22 miles further away. Researchers say this thinning process is known as necking. Imagine stretching a piece of Play-Doh. The middle becomes thinner and weaker until it eventually pulls apart. Scientists believe the same thing is now happening to the African continent. Even more intriguing, researchers studying underground gases beneath Zambia discovered rare helium signatures rising from as deep as 100 miles underground. These gases may be coming directly from Earth's mantle. Some scientists think this could be evidence that a completely new tectonic boundary is beginning to form beneath Central Africa. If that's true, the continent may already be entering the early stages of a permanent split. And this would not just create a crack in the ground. In a few million years, magma could begin rising between the separating plates, forming brand new seafloor. Eventually, water from the Indian Ocean may rush into the gap, creating an entirely new ocean that divides part of Africa into separate landmasses. The same tectonic forces once shattered Pangea and shaped the modern world map. Researchers now believe they may be witnessing the beginning of that process all over again. If you pull up a map, here, let me do that for you. The Strait of Gibraltar looks almost laughably narrow. At its tightest point, Europe and Africa sit just about 9 miles apart. You could technically kayak that on a calm day, if only it wasn't highly dangerous. Now, engineers want to punch through rock, pressure, and moving continents to turn that ancient divide into a boring 30-minute commute. And it's going to take a lot of boring. Yeah, that's a joke. But wait, why go through all that trouble and not just connect Europe and Africa with a bridge? Well, the biggest problem is the Strait of Gibraltar itself. The water here moves fast. The currents rank among the strongest on the planet. Plus, the strait is exactly where the African and Eurasian tectonic plates meet. The African plate keeps creeping northward, slowly squeezing toward Europe. It moves ridiculously slowly, just a few inches a year. So no one is going to wake up tomorrow and stroll across. Scientists built a detailed 3D model of the region, and it shows that in about 20 years, the strait could finally close and turn into the Isthmus of Gibraltar, basically a land bridge between the continents. But why wait millions of years? Plus, right now, that slow plate movement still causes real-world trouble. When those massive slabs of rock grind against each other, they build up pressure. That pressure releases itself as earthquakes, tiny fractures, and sudden shifts in the ground under the sea. Nothing down there stays perfectly still, Even if someone managed to build a bridge, powerful streams could shake the structure non-stop and tear joints apart, unless designers created an insanely strong system. And that kind of engineering would eat unbelievable amounts of money and resources. If that's not enough, there's the depth problem. We're talking about almost 3,000 feet. That's one of the deepest straits on Earth. Any pile there would need insane length and strength, probably built from several massive sections bolted together. And even after installing them, earthquakes could still snap everything apart while currents drag pieces across the sea. But the most serious issue involves nature. The water here has a high salt content, which makes it heavier. That heavy salt water sinks into the Mediterranean basin and pushes colder water back toward the Atlantic. These movements create swirling currents, turbulence, and underwater boiling zones full of nutrients. That chaos feeds phytoplankton, tiny organisms that sit at the bottom of the entire marine food chain. Whales and fish absolutely love it there. The strange shapes of the seabed and the sunlight hitting different layers of water create perfect living conditions. If construction started, there would be dust, crushed rock, carbon dioxide, fuel, and falling materials. All of it would cloud the water and ruin the natural food chain. That's why a tunnel sounds like a better idea. Spain first proposed to build a modern tunnel here in 1930, but it was impossible to drill through hard rock with the technology they had at that time. But then, in December 2003, Spain, this time together with Morocco, decided to go back to the idea and build a tunnel that would connect the rail systems of the two countries. It took them another 20 years to start designing and planning the tunnel. Now, construction is scheduled to start in 2030 and will take around 10 years. This tunnel will need to be a true engineering marvel that will live with the motion of tectonic plates, not go against it. The structure will need flexibility, shock resistance, and a safety margin for movements that no one can perfectly predict. So, according to the new project, the tunnel would plunge down to more than 1,000 feet below sea level at its deepest point. That makes it about 6 times deeper than the Channel Tunnel between England and France. Now, length matters too. The full tunnel would stretch close to 25 miles, with roughly 17 miles directly beneath the seabed. Once you're in the middle, you're farther from open air than most people will ever be in their lives. It means no quick exits or easy rescues. Everything has to work perfectly. Ventilation, power, signaling, because there's no backup plan called just open a door. If it does work out, high-speed trains could carry passengers and freight from Spain to Morocco in about 30 minutes, something close to a regular subway ride. And that's not just convenience. That's a rewiring of trade routes, labor movement, tourism, and economic gravity between continents. More than 12 million people could travel on that route every year. Now, the design won't rely on one, but 2 parallel twin rail tunnels, one for each direction, plus service and emergency corridors in between. All of this will cost around $10 billion. And engineers will need to design something flexible enough to bend, absorb, and survive slow continental drift and constant pressure. The tunnel won't go against Earth. It will ride with it, like a shock absorber built into the planet itself. And this idea doesn't come out of nowhere, as humans have already built impressive underwater tunnels. The Channel Tunnel, the most famous example, already turned 30 in 2024. It runs under the English Channel, linking England and France. Trains can zoom through it in about 30 minutes, hitting around 99 miles an hour, and it's the longest underwater tunnel in the world as of now. 3 tunnels are running parallel under the seabed. 2 of them carry trains, one in each direction, and the third is a service tunnel in the middle used for maintenance access, evacuation, ventilation, and just general support. The whole thing was privately funded and crazy expensive. It went over budget, and while it eventually turned a profit, it hasn't been the financial goldmine people hoped for. Despite that, engineers still consider it one of the most impressive feats of modern civil engineering. And they even connected continents underwater before. Istanbul's Eurasia Tunnel has a 3.3-mile section that goes straight under the water. It links Europe and Asia by road in about 15 minutes. What once took nearly 2 hours now feels routine. The tunnel took 55 months to build and cost $1.3 billion. They had to reorganize traffic for it to make the access roads of the best quality. And the tunnel didn't just connect continents, but also helped reduce atmospheric and acoustic pollution in the city. Right next to it, the Marmarai Rail Tunnel slides trains beneath the same strait, carrying commuters between continents like it's no big deal. These tunnels sit in an earthquake zone under shipping lanes, beneath constant currents, and they work. Once you see those projects, the Gibraltar Tunnel stops sounding insane and starts sounding possible, maybe even inevitable. Which naturally leads us to the most dangerous thought humans ever have. If we can do that, what else can we connect? Well, that's where the dream goes full sci-fi. People imagine stepping onto a train in New York and stepping off in London less than an hour later. No jet lag, no turbulence, just a straight shot beneath the Atlantic. Some proposals throw around numbers like 54 minutes, but that speed requires vacuum trains moving around 5,000 miles per hour. That technology doesn't exist outside of lab concepts and computer models, yet. Now, even if we ditch the sci-fi speed and use conventional rail, the trip would take roughly 15 hours, slower than an 8-hour flight. Then comes the real nightmare. The Atlantic is 12,000 feet deep on average, with pressure, geology, and distances that make Gibraltar look like a backyard project. Engineers would face earthquakes, underwater mountains, volcanic zones, and even finding a leak would feel impossible. Fixing it would be next level. The energy costs alone would make today's mega projects look cheap. That's why right now, a transatlantic tunnel lives in the same category as warp drives and cities on Mars. Inspiring, useful for pushing ideas forward, but not something you break ground on next year. The Gibraltar Tunnel, though, sits right on the edge of that line between impossible and inevitable. What once separated civilizations now tempts us as a corridor. What once seemed impossible now connects continents.
Africa is ripping itself apart. A giant crack is tearing through the continent and stretching south like a zipper being pulled open. And it's happening faster than anyone expected. Now, scientists think the main trigger might not be buried deep inside Earth, but up in the sky. That's right. What might be speeding up this breakup process is the region's drying climate and brutal droughts. And that feels off, right? Usually tectonic plates move first and the climate changes afterward, but in East Africa, it might be flipped. The climate may actually be helping the plates pull apart faster. But first, let's look at what's really going on there. So, Earth's crust isn't one solid shell. It's made of giant tectonic plates, massive slabs of rock that never stop moving. They grind past each other, collide, slide under, climb over, or stretch apart. This motion is so slow, we don't notice it. But over long periods, those tiny shifts reshape continents, just like what's happening in Africa. For about 30 million years, the Arabian plate has been moving away from the African plate. That slow pull split the land. The seawater rushed in to fill the gap, forming the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. And that's not the only breakup happening there. In Eastern Africa, the Somali plate is stretching away from the Nubian plate. This is opening up the East African Rift Valley, cutting right through places like Ethiopia and Kenya. The region where these plates meet has a name. It's a triple junction. But in this case, they aren't crashing into each other. All three tectonic plates are diverging. When that happens, the crust gets pulled in different directions at once, like fabric being stretched from three corners. It weakens, thins out, and cracks open. They're pulling apart at different speeds too. The Arabian plate is moving away from Africa at about an inch per year. The two African plates are separating more slowly, roughly between half an inch and 0.2 inches per year. And as they open that gap, hot material from deep inside Earth rises up and hardens, creating brand new seafloor along the split. I know, a few inches per year sounds ridiculously slow, but what makes this event so fascinating is that we're watching it happen in real time. We can actually see Africa slowly breaking apart, and it's terrifying. Back in 2005, a 35-mile long rift that opened up in the Ethiopian desert. The crack is 20 feet wide in some places, which is roughly the size of a shipping container. This is just one example of how active the region really is. From space, satellite images show valleys and rifts slowly widening over time. And down on the ground, people are posting videos of places where the Earth has already split open, leaving big cracks and gaps. Roads, houses, even schools are getting torn apart. The whole area keeps shaking from earthquakes, and the volcanoes are very active. What I mean is, even though this splitting process is super slow, we can actually see it happening, and it's unstoppable. Experts believe this crack in the East African Rift Valley will become a gateway. Waters of the Indian Ocean will eventually invade the valley and fill the growing gap. That will help pull the land apart even more, and eventually it'll create a brand new ocean. And we know that can happen because Earth has done it before. That's exactly how the Atlantic Ocean formed about 180 million years ago, when South America and Africa pulled away from each other. If the East African Rift keeps opening up, parts of Eastern Africa, Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, and a big chunk of Ethiopia could one day break away from the rest of the continent. That means countries like Zambia and Uganda could actually end up with brand new stunning coastlines. But don't pack your swimsuit yet. Unfortunately, none of us will be swimming in the waters of this future sixth ocean anytime soon. Scientists estimate the full split would take about 5 to 10 million years. That's basically forever in human terms. But in Earth terms, it's surprisingly fast, almost like record speed. Now, scientists are trying to figure out why it's happening so fast. I mean, faster than it should. And here's a new intriguing possibility: a drying climate. One of the biggest clues starts right here at Lake Turkana. This lake in Kenya is about 19 miles wide, and it's up to 400 feet deep in some places. But that's nothing compared to more than 5,000 years ago, when the lake level was up to 500 feet higher. Back then, the continent was going through something known as the African Humid Period. It was a time when Africa was wetter than it is today, and the Sahara wasn't a desert at all. It was green, wet, and full of lakes, rivers, and vegetation. But since then, the whole region has shifted into a much drier phase. So researchers took sediment samples from the bottom of Lake Turkana to figure out past water levels and how sediment washed into the lake over time. And while they were doing that, they noticed something else. Those sediment layers preserved lots of tiny faults and even the fingerprints of ancient earthquakes. Wait, wow! That means Lake Turkana might not be a simple lake. It could actually be one huge crack in the earth that eventually filled up with water. In other words, it could be a direct result of this whole rifting process. And now scientists think the same thing might be true for other deep, narrow lakes in the region, like Lake Malawi along the Tanzania-Mozambique border. So, scientists came up with a wild theory. What if these lakes are helping split Africa apart faster? Okay, maybe the theory isn't that wild. After all, water can indeed affect tectonic plates. For example, when glaciers melt and disappear, all that weight is removed, and the land underneath slowly pops back up, kind of like bread rising after you take something heavy off of it. That's called isostatic rebound, and big amounts of water can do the opposite. They press down on the crust, which can also affect things like faults and earthquakes. At Lake Turkana, something interesting shows up in the data. After the African Humid Period ended, the faults around the lake started moving faster, by about 0.007 inches per year. I know, that's a lot of zeros. But over thousands of years, that extra push can add up. and it could help explain why earthquakes might be more common in the region today than they were around 8,000 years ago. The study then ran computer simulations and found two likely reasons the shaking and fault movement sped up. First, there's less water pushing down on the ground. With that weight gone, the faults can slide more easily, like loosening a vise that was squeezing two pieces of wood together. Second, there's a volcano on an island on the south side of Lake Turkana. Deep underground, it has a pocket of hot, molten rock. When the lake level dropped after the African humid period, the pressure on the earth below eased up, like taking the lid off a pot. That lets the rock underneath melt a bit more. The extra melt flows into the volcano's magma chamber, swelling it up like a balloon. And that extra pressure can jolt nearby faults and trigger more movement. So yeah, drought and falling lake levels could be speeding up the splitting process. But it's not like the climate is creating the rift from scratch. It's more like the ground is already under tension, and the climate is giving it a little extra push. The real reason Africa is breaking apart might be related to something called superplume, an enormous column of scorching hot rock rising from deep inside the earth. Think of it like a balloon underground that's slowly filling up. As it pushes upward, it puts pressure on the crust above it. Over time, that pressure weakens the crust and slowly cracks it apart. And even though none of us will be alive to see the final result of this process, it's still amazing to realize that we're watching a continent split, almost in real time.
For eons, the Red Sea has separated the continents of Asia and Africa. They're close enough to wave at each other, but far enough that moving between them requires planning. Ferries do the job, but it's time for something better. That's why engineers have envisioned an ambitious mega project of tunnels and bridges that will not only link the two continents, but also reshape the region forever. Millions of years ago, the Arabian landmass slowly drifted away from Africa, opening a watery scar that we now call the Red Sea. This place is famous for its crystal clear water that looks filtered even when it isn't, as well as for coral reefs that seem to be painted by an overachieving artist. Let's zoom in on one specific location, the Strait of Tiran. Every ship headed toward the upper ports squeezed through this one busy hallway. On the one side is Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula, rugged, golden, and sprinkled with resort towns. On the other side, it's Saudi Arabia, the Tabuk coast, where quiet desert hills stroll right down to neon blue water. The distance between them looks tiny on a map, almost like someone forgot to connect the lines. That's because the strait is only about 8 miles from peninsula to peninsula, close enough that on a clear day you can sometimes see the opposite shoreline. It's a busy gateway, and it's the exact gap designers want to turn into a direct road and rail link. So what are they actually trying to build? The idea is to create one continuous route between the Sinai Peninsula and the Tabuk coast. Engineers are still deciding whether it should be a bridge, a tunnel, or a hybrid, the combination of two. The problem is under the water. Near the shore, the bottom is shallow enough to support strong columns, but as you move farther out, the seabed drops quickly until it reaches about 900 feet. It's almost like walking off an underwater cliff. That sudden plunge is too deep for standard bridge supports. The design has to adjust to the landscape instead of forcing one shape across the whole gap. If they go with a bridge, the builders would place huge steel tubes called caissons on the seafloor. Think of them as giant metal buckets. Once they're in position, the water gets pumped out so crews can build a dry foundation inside. Concrete turns that space into a pillar rising from the seabed. The floating cranes drop long road sections between those pillars like puzzle pieces. It works well in shallow areas, but anchoring becomes difficult in deep waters due to high pressure, soft ground, and strong waves. Tunnels avoid this by going under the problem, literally. Crews can send tunnel boring machines called worms, or they can build submarine-sized tunnel segments on land and sink them into place. It's the same trick used in the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau megalink, which proves it works even in busy, deep water. Now, people might look at the map and think, 8 miles? That doesn't sound so bad. In reality, it's nothing like tossing a giant tree trunk over a river and calling it a bridge. Cars, buses, and trains need those long, slow, friendly ramps that don't feel like a roller coaster. By the time you build those ramps on both sides, the whole thing could stretch to nearly 20 miles. That puts it in the same club as giants like the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel in the US or the King Fahd Causeway between Saudi Arabia and Bahrain. But it's not just the scale or unpredictable seabed that makes this intercontinental project challenging. There's also the climate. Temperatures regularly pass 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Concrete dries faster than planned, so crews have to cool it or work in shorter windows. Steel stretches in the heat just enough to make precise work annoying. And workers themselves cannot stand in direct sunlight for long without feeling like a baked potato. On top of that, the salty sea air chews through metal quicker than most people expect, so the whole structure needs tough protective layers and regular checkup. If this project gets the green light, you're looking at a timeline of several years. A good comparison is the Øresund link between Denmark and Sweden. It's only about 10 miles long and still took around 4 years to build, in an environment that is much easier to handle than the Red Sea. Then there's the price tag. Early numbers land around $4 billion, but that feels more like a starting guess than a final bill. If they run into problems, that figure will almost certainly climb. There's also one other problem that must be brought up: swimming right under the surface. The Strait of Tiran is home to dolphins, rays, sea turtles, and even sharks, including harmless reef sharks that glide around like they're protecting the beautiful, colorful corals below. These reefs aren't just decoration, they're some of the healthiest in the entire Red Sea. Scientists say that in parts of the northern Red Sea, some corals tolerate higher temperatures than many others around the world, which makes these reefs especially valuable from a climate resilience perspective. That means even a single mistake during construction could cloud the water with sediment, and that alone can smother corals like dust settling on wet paint. The same goes for noise, drilling, and ship movement. Reefs can't exactly move away if annoyed like fish can. Once they're damaged, it can take decades for them to grow back. That is, if they grow back. To avoid that, planners have to build in ways that keep the water as clear and calm as possible. Construction zones may need silt curtains to stop sediment from drifting away. Heavy equipment might have to avoid areas with dense coral clusters. Some sections could lean more toward tunnels instead of pillars to leave the seabed undisturbed. Every decision has to match the underwater map, not just the one on land. On top of that, the whole project would need constant supervision from scientists and inspectors. They would have to check how cloudy the water becomes and how marine animals behave during the work. If something looks off, the only responsible move is to slow down or change the method, instead of just rushing to finish faster and leaving the reef to pay the price. But if everything finally clicks into place, the payoff is massive. Right now, if you decide to skip the ferry and stay on land, the map punishes you. You have to loop all the way around the top of the Red Sea, through other countries on a drive more than 1,000 miles. All of that just to cross a stretch of water that is only a few miles wide at its narrowest point. It's like walking around the entire block just to knock on your neighbor's door. A permanent link would change this. Travel time drops, ports on both sides become easier to reach, and a drive from Africa to Asia suddenly feels as normal as crossing a long highway bridge. Not to mention the coolest part, which would be the view if they decided on the hybrid version. You begin your journey on the Sinai side, with the desert behind you and the Red Sea ahead. Instead of waiting in a ferry line, you roll onto a rising ramp while the water glimmers below. The road dips into a tunnel under a busy shipping lane, and before long, you're back in the sunlight on the other side, now on a different continent. The train version could feel even smoother. You find your seat, the doors close, and the train glides toward the crossing without any stop-and-go traffic. It slips into its own tunnel section, runs quietly under the sea, and pops back up on the Asian side before you have even finished scrolling your feed. For tourists, that could mean more resorts, more quick weekend trips, and a brand new continental hop that becomes a must-try experience. For delivery trucks, Every hour saved is money earned. Even local towns would feel the change. They'd get more visitors, more trade, and bigger profits. A link like this doesn't just connect land. It connects economies, ports, and everyday life. And that's a giant opportunity, as long as the underwater world stays protected. The floor is lava. Haha, just kidding. But honestly, it's kind of falling apart. You might not feel it yet, but a huge part of North America has already lost 37 miles worth of rock from its foundation. And no, this isn't about earthquakes or giant sinkholes. It's about the continent losing pieces of the very thing that keeps the ground from wobbling around like a bad carnival ride. A team of researchers has just dropped a geological bombshell. Part of North America's ground is thinning out like a very sad, very slow ice cream drip. How do they know? They basically gave Earth a high-tech full-body MRI and created 3D maps showing how rocks once considered indestructible are now melting away into the planet's guts, like an upside-down cheese pizza inside an oven. But to really understand this mess, you first have to meet my old friends, cratons. Cratons are like the roots of the continents. They're thick, tough, and ancient. We're talking billions of years old. These bad boys survived meteor impacts, supervolcanoes, and even the tectonic movement of plates. If the plates got into fistfights, for example, you can bet we would see mountain ranges being born. If they got a divorce, drifting apart from each other, then a whole new ocean would be born. All of these things leave scars on the surface of Earth, but the cratons seem to always remain unfazed, like the cockroaches of geology. And since a craton can basically get punched in the face and feel nothing, scientists always assumed these things were nearly indestructible. But then, a group of researchers took their fancy machines to the test and realized that, wait, the cratons are falling apart? How? Enter the Farallon Plate, a really ancient tectonic plate that started to slide under North America's major plate over 100 million years ago. This is a pretty normal process, actually. It's called subduction, and it's how Earth recycles rocks and keeps itself from overheating. This subduction thing has been happening for so long that, by now, the Farallon is almost 400 miles away from the craton, sitting pretty chill at the lower mantle, weirdly close to the outer core of our planet. But the Farallon has been causing trouble, like that one roommate who moved out but keeps leaving weird stuff in the fridge. You see, as it sinks, it tugs on the bottom of North America's foundation, stretching it out and causing pieces to fall off into the deep mantle. And if that wasn't enough drama, the sinking Farallon has also leaked water and carbon dioxide into the surrounding rocks, making the craton even softer and easier to shred apart. Thanks, Farallon. Very cool of you. By studying hundreds of earthquakes across thousands of monitoring stations, scientists have confirmed the story. Big chunks of continental material are dripping downward, thinning the craton by as much as 37 miles. That's more missing rocks than can fit into a milk carton. Sounds dramatic, right? But don't worry. This is happening at a snail's pace. It'll take millions of years for anything noticeable to happen. Your great-great-great-great few grandkids from the distant future might still be standing on solid ground. But don't get too comfy. This thing may not be an urgent problem, but there's another type of sinking that's happening faster than you can say, "Help!" Here's the thing. By 2050, at least 32 major cities in the US, including New York, Baltimore, and Charleston, could be partially underwater. And guess what? This one is mostly our fault. Scientists noticed that since 2007, some cities have been sinking into the ground between 0.04 and 0.08 inches every year. Charleston, in South Carolina, is pulling ahead in the worst way possible, sinking 0.15 inches annually. Sure, these numbers sound tiny and a bit ridiculous, but Charleston is barely 9 feet above sea level. And a little sinking goes a long way when the ocean is breathing down your neck. On really bad flood days, people there have to abandon their cars and basically swim home. This whole phenomenon is called land subsidence. And when you mix sinking land with rising sea levels, you get a disaster cocktail of flooded streets, salty farmland, ghost forests, and a lot of very cranky homeowners. And it doesn't stop with just homes. Infrastructure like bridges, roads, airports, and power plants, all things we rely on daily, are also at risk of serious damage. Flooded electrical grids and sunken highways could cause billions more in economic losses and create major safety hazards for communities. Now, let's be fair, not everything is humanity's fault. Some of this trouble dates all the way back to the Ice Age. About 12,000 years ago, massive ice sheets covered the northern US. They were heavy, like seriously heavy. The weight pushed the land down, and when the ice melted, the ground didn't just pop back up like a trampoline. Instead, it started playing a weird game of geological seesaw. The places that were squished started rising, and the places that weren't got pulled down. This whole process, called glacial isostatic adjustment, try to say that 3 times fast. But of course, humans found a way to make it worse. Groundwater extraction is a major culprit. Think of it like pulling the stuff out of the mattress. After a while, the whole thing just sags. In places like California's Central Valley, the land is dropping by up to 8 inches a year because we keep pumping out water during droughts. In cities like New York, the problem isn't just water. Skyscrapers themselves are making it worse. Yep, turns out if you stack millions of tons of concrete and steel onto soft ground, it tends to flatten. And in case you're wondering, the total mass of New York City's buildings is around 1.68 trillion pounds. That's about the same as 3.5 million statues of liberty piled up. With so much weight concentrated over a relatively small area, the underlying soils have no choice but to compress over time. And if you thought it couldn't get messier, think again. We've been building dams, which stop rivers from delivering fresh sediment to coastal areas. That sediment is kind of like Mother Nature's way of fluffing the ground back up. Without it, coastal lands are compacting like an old sponge. Plus, when wetlands are drained for agriculture or construction, the peaty soil dries out and collapses. Honestly, it's like the ground just can't catch a break. Scientists also noticed that the areas that used to be lush wetlands are now among the fastest sinking spots in the country, especially along the Gulf Coast. Louisiana, for example, is losing about a football field of land because of this mix of subsidence and rising seas. So what's the end game here for us regular people who just want to live above sea level? Well, it's not looking great. Ghost forests, which are basically drowned woodlands, are popping up. Farmland is turning salty and unusable. And even sunny day flooding, where streets flood without any rain, is becoming a thing. Yikes! Meanwhile, over on the West Coast, California is not exactly winning either. San Francisco and Los Angeles are both sinking, which means that rising sea levels could hit them twice as hard and twice as fast. In some places like the Palos Verdes Peninsula, the ground has been sinking so fast, people over there might as well live like moles. So, is America turning into the next Atlantis? Probably not next week, but without serious action, like cutting back on groundwater pumping and planning smarter cities, at least 500,000 people are in serious danger. And the housing damage could easily rack up a jaw-dropping $109 billion by 2050. In the end, while North America isn't about to sink like a poorly made souffle, it's definitely showing some cracks in the crust. So maybe let's ease up on groundwater pumping, rethink how and where we build, and invest a little more in keeping our feet dry. After all, if the floor really does become lava someday, we're gonna wish we had at least fixed the leaks first. See how the Antarctic Peninsula looks just like South America, but upside down? This isn't just a coincidence. It's the ghost of a 30-million-year-old breakup. These continents were once connected, but their divorce gave birth to an ocean current so powerful, it was capable of completely freezing Antarctica and shaping its landscape. Here's how it went down.
Tectonic plates pulled a sneaky move and cracked open a ridiculously narrow passage in the ocean, about only 500 miles wide, forcing 4.5 trillion cubic feet of water to flow inside this geological straw. This was the birth of an ocean current stronger than the Amazon River. This ocean current, called the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, by the way, flows in a circular motion, going clockwise because of the strong winds that blow over there. This circular motion around Antarctica caused erosion, shaping the landmass of the continent into a circle, except for that stubborn peninsula, which is being slowly dragged east like a kid refusing to leave a playground. Wait, South America and Antarctica used to be one? Yep, a long time ago. South America, Australia, and Antarctica were all part of a supercontinent called Gondwana, which also included Africa at some point. Back then, South America and Antarctica used to be basically joined at the hip by a land bridge called the Antarctic Land Bridge, which just so happened to be a lush green forest and also a great dinosaur highway. Yeah, you heard it right. Dinosaurs. A 95-million-year-old dino, whose name I can't pronounce, sorry, was discovered in Australia, and scientists found out it had actually been a distant cousin of Argentina's Sarmientosaurus. Same jaw, same chisel teeth, same everything. These guys were like identical twins, separated by an ocean. How? Because back then, Antarctica wasn't a frozen wasteland. It was a temperate rainforest, like Oregon, making it a pretty nice travel route for a dino family. But the land bridge wasn't just for dinosaurs. About 40 million years ago, the ancestors of Australia's marsupials waddled to the land down under all the way from South America, taking the Antarctica route, another proof that these continents used to be connected. Things remained somewhat peaceful for the dinos and the marsupials until Earth's ground started moving. This is what a German scientist called the continental drift theory, back in 1912. Our German friend here basically looked at the coast of South America and went, "Hey, this looks like it could fit into the coast of Africa." Like a scientific Sherlock Holmes, he noticed what others had overlooked for centuries. The continents were clearly pieces of a larger puzzle. And he was right. Here's the deal. Planet Earth is made of many layers of rocks and metals, like a cosmic onion. The outermost layer, the lithosphere, is divided into pretty solid tectonic plates that move atop a layer of softer, somewhat molten rocks, like slippery ice. This is why the plates move. In fact, they've been rearranging Earth's face for billions of years, with supercontinents forming and breaking apart in cycles, like a slow-motion game of bumper cars. This movement might be pretty slow since most tectonic plates only move 0 to 3.9 inches every year, except for the Nazca plate, racing ahead at 7.8 inches, about as fast as your hair grows. But don't let their snail's pace fool you. These shifting slabs are the ultimate planet shapers. Their slow dance gives us everything from earthquakes that build mountains like the Himalayas, to rifts that birth oceans like the Atlantic. All because the oceanic crust is dense and sinks like a stone, while continental crust floats like a cork. It's this density difference that explains why continents exist at all. Without it, Earth would be completely covered by shallow seas. This slow-motion planetary renovation project is exactly what tore South America and Antarctica apart 30 million years ago. The plates under these continents started to drift apart in a process called crustal extension. It's like the lithosphere was pizza dough being slowly stretched until it thins and splits. As the crust stretched, it became thinner and weaker, eventually cracking like the surface of a drying lake bed. This whole thing gave birth to a new tectonic plate, the Scotia Plate, that emerged between South America and Antarctica, like a geological divorce lawyer. For a while, parts of this plate stayed above water as the last gasp of the Antarctic land bridge. It was Earth's version of that one thread still connecting your hoodie after the zipper breaks. These final connections might have persisted as chains of islands, but just like that fraying hoodie, the connection couldn't last forever. Eventually, this small but mighty plate became the final nail in the coffin of the land bridge connecting the two continents. Just like all the tectonic plates, this one was also on the move. As it expanded eastward, it opened a new passage of water called the Drake Passage, slowly covering the Antarctic land bridge with ocean water. The process was like pulling open elevator doors. At first, just a crack, then wider and wider until the connection was completely broken. This geographical divorce had chilling consequences. The new Drake Passage allowed the Antarctic circumpolar current to form, creating an endless loop of cold water that isolated Antarctica, shaped its land, and even cooled the entire planet. This current acts like a wall around Antarctica, blocking warm water and invasive species while regulating global climate. Eventually, Antarctica turned into an icebox that is 98% covered in ice sheets, and that holds about 61% of Earth's fresh water. Nowadays, this continent holds the title of the windiest, driest, and iciest place on Earth. It's a frozen desert where temperatures plunge below -128.6 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze your breath mid-air. A layer of ice there can be more than a mile thick, and it expands even further in winter to cover an area larger than the continental United States. Today, if you want to travel to Antarctica, the quickest sea route is through the Drake Passage, a 500-mile-wide body of water that is narrow enough for the winds to scream across thousands of miles, transforming into monstrous waves that can tower up to 49 feet, though calm days create waves only 13 to 16 feet high. Still twice as tall as Atlantic waves, mind you. This is probably why sailors call this stretch of ocean the Drake Shake. But tectonic movement isn't just about shifting continents. It's Earth's ultimate life support system. You see, about half of our planet's heat comes from radioactive decay in the core. Thanks, uranium-235. Something like nature's nuclear reactor. This heat is behind everything from volcanoes to the very plate motion that once connected Antarctica to South America. And it only comes out of the core because of tectonic movement. Without this internal heat engine, Earth would be just like Mars. When the plates move and release heat, they also release CO2 gases into the atmosphere, regulating the temperature of our planet. And when the plates move underwater, they take a lot of this CO2 back to Earth's interior, recycling all this gas. This is why the plates can change our air, climate, and even the evolution of life itself just by moving around. But billions of years ago, these plates were not moving around. Back then, it was like Earth was wearing a solid ceramic shell with many cracks. But even without tectonic movement, the heat managed to escape through these cracks in a process called stagnant lid tectonics, kickstarting all life on Earth. And no, tectonic movement is not a thing of the past. Earthquakes are the living proof that it is not just happening today, but might repeat again on a more dramatic scale in the future. You see, to form supercontinents like Pangea, smaller megacontinents have to dive beneath another. And scientists predict that a similar process might create a new supercontinent called Pangea Proxima in 250 million years. By then, humans might be extinct or living on Mars, but Earth's tectonic dance will continue, even without us. Not bad for something that moves more slowly than a traffic jam. Turns out, Antarctica and South America used to be BFFs before all that tectonic drama split them up, like a messy breakup that literally froze one of them out. Now, they just awkwardly mirror each other from across the Drake Passage. Classic exes.
Consider South America and Africa. Don't they kind of look like they fit together, like puzzle pieces? Well, they actually did. But about 130 million years ago, South America was like, bye, and slowly started drifting away. These days, it's around 1,800 miles from Africa, and it's still on the move. Every year, the continent shifts a little more toward the Pacific Ocean. So, how's that even happening? Tectonic plates are constantly moving. That's what makes the Earth's surface shift over time, going from this to what we see today. But those movements happen so slowly that you and I can't see them go. So, no, Brazilians or Chileans aren't out there feeling their continent inching westward. But the numbers don't lie. South America is moving, and apparently all it wants is to get as far away as possible from this massive underwater mountain range called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. But what exactly is pushing the land toward the Pacific Ocean? It is the heat inside our planet. Way down beneath the ocean, there are cracks in the Earth's crust, and magma, super hot melted rock, rises up through those cracks. When that happens, the magma cools and hardens into solid rock. Over time, this process might build underwater mountains, like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. And as more new crust forms, it begins to push the older crust out of the way. In the process, tectonic plates and the continents riding on top of them get pushed along. Now, on the other side of South America, over by the Pacific, there is the Nazca Plate. It's heavier and it's moving eastward. Since it is denser, it is sliding underneath the South American Plate. This entire process is called subduction, and it's happening at a rate of about 3 inches per year. By the way, the collision between these two plates is what's behind all those breathtaking volcanoes scattered throughout the Andes, and it's also making the continent move. So, if everything goes according to plan, projections show that South America will end up more centered in the Pacific Ocean in the future. But some models suggest something way crazier. Before we get into that, though, we need to clear something up. Why on earth isn't Africa following in South America's footsteps? I mean, shouldn't it be drifting west too? Well, not quite. Africa is doing its own thing because it sits on the African Plate. So the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is located between those two continents, and just like it pushes the South American Plate, it also pushes the African Plate, but in the opposite direction. It's like this ridge is trying to split up two ex-besties, you know? But there's more. Africa is also being influenced by the East African Rift. That's one of those massive cracks we talked about earlier, but it's happening on land, which makes it extra dramatic. This is what's causing the continent to slowly split apart. It's a long story, but let's just say the rift is pulling Africa in more directions than South America ever had to deal with. Okay, now it is finally time to talk about that crazier thing that might happen to South America and everything around it in the future. Theory number 1. It could break away from North America. I know, super dramatic, but don't panic. We're talking hundreds of millions of years from now, and I won't be around. You see, both continents are moving in the same general direction, but at different speeds. The North American Plate is cruising along at about 1 inch per year, while South America is moving a bit faster. So even though they're heading the same way, they are not keeping pace. Over time, as the Atlantic Ocean continues to widen and the Pacific keeps shrinking, all this tectonic movement could eventually pull the Americas apart. Theory number 2. Marine life could go through some major changes. Right now, the Americas act as kind of a giant wall between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Because of that, sea animals have evolved differently on each side. Take the green sea turtle, for example. The ones living in the Atlantic tend to be bigger and lighter in color. Meanwhile, their Pacific cousins are usually smaller and darker. But if, one day, there is no land blocking these two populations from mixing, they would end up with brand new migration routes, new nesting spots, and a lot more overlap in their territories. Now, multiply that scenario by hundreds of other species, and things could really get shaken up. We're talking about new interactions, unexpected competition, and maybe even the rise of entirely new species. Alright, theory number 3. America might meet Africa again. Right now, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge is busy creating a new seafloor, and because of that, the Atlantic Ocean is slowly getting wider. But in about 125 million years, scientists believe that process could come to a stop. Instead of the seafloor spreading apart, the ocean floor might start getting pulled under the continents. When that happens, the Atlantic will stop growing and start shrinking. And the water section between South America and Africa is likely to be the first part pulled beneath the land. That means the Americas and Africa could meet again. And when that happens, border countries could turn into super shaky places, with earthquakes happening all the time and brand new volcanoes popping up left and right. The eastern United States would no longer be known for the peaceful green slopes of the Appalachians, but for snow-covered giants that occasionally spew lava and ash, more like the Cascade Range out west. Countries would end up with totally new neighbors. Brazil might line up with Nigeria and Cameroon. Uruguay could be sitting right next to Angola. And Argentina might be sharing a border with South Africa. So if these two continents really do merge, how intense would that be? Well, for starters, this new supercontinent would instantly become the biggest one on Earth, about 1.5 times the size of Asia. And chances are, a brand new mountain range would form right where the continents meet, creating a natural border between nations. Being part of the same massive continent could make a lot of things way easier. For one, tourism could totally take off. People traveling between countries by land without needing pricey plane tickets could be a game changer. But it wouldn't stop there. Other types of economic activity could get a major boost too. Now on one side we have South America, which already produces and sells a wide variety of foods, from wheat to bananas, beef, cocoa, soybeans, hey, you name it. On the other side, there is Africa, exporting things like textiles and clothing. That alone would make them a super powerful bloc when it comes to trading raw goods. But can you name another important thing these two continents have in common? Yep, petroleum. Countries in South America, like Brazil, Venezuela, and Colombia, are major oil exporters. And over in Africa, you've got Nigeria, Algeria, and Libya doing the same. Now, can you see just how powerful that kind of union could be? Meanwhile, let's talk about animals. These two massive lands coming together could lead us to wild meetups, like a capybara sharing space with a Nile crocodile, or a sloth seeing a hyena from the top of a tree. This could even lead to new animal hybrids showing up, like a tabby crocodile or a sloth hyena. Okay, those weren't the cleverest names, and honestly, these animals wouldn't be able to mate or even wouldn't want to. But you get the point, right? It's not all positive, unfortunately. New species showing up could become predators, competitors, or even parasites to the native plants and animals. It would take a long time for things to settle into a new balance in those border regions. But honestly, no one really knows how long it would take. The only thing I do know is neither of us will be around to see it, which is okay. So it turns out that you can't drive between South America and North America. And there's a simple reason for that. There are no roads connecting the two continents, not even a rudimentary one. Technically, you could try your luck crossing on foot, but let me tell you, that would be a huge, huge mistake. The region that connects the two continents is called the Darien Gap. It stretches across southern Panama's Darien province and the northern part of Colombia. The only land route there is a 60-mile jungle trek. Crossing it can take anywhere from 3 to 10 days. It depends on weather conditions, how much you're carrying, and honestly, just pure luck. Chance plays a big role here, because this isn't some chill, relaxing nature walk. It's a harsh, extreme environment, known for being completely isolated and one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Still, people seem to forget that and go there anyway. Every year, the number of people crossing just keeps growing. In 2014, fewer than 10,000 people crossed the gap. In 2023, that number increased to 520,000. Now, you might be wondering, what are so many people doing in the middle of the two American continents, risking all that danger? Well, that's because the Darien Gap has become a route for refugees migrating to North America. But to get there, they face all kinds of dangers, from insect bites and infections to serious fractures. We're talking about a no-man's land. Since there are no police stations, immigrants must also watch out for thieves. Along the way, they have no choice but to rely on and support each other. Most people start the crossing with at least a tent or tarp, rain boots, water, and some food. But these things get heavy fast, and people normally can't carry enough supplies for the entire journey. At some point, people start drinking river water to avoid dehydration. But the water's full of bacteria and dirt, so it causes intestinal issues. And if things get serious, there's no medical help there. To make this whole scenario even worse, the temperatures are brutal, often hitting over 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, a small subset of people who venture through the Darien Gap are hardcore adventurers and travelers looking for a survival experience in the jungle. But this region is no place for a relaxing vacation. A group of tourists who went there in 2023 ended up getting jungle rot, a fungus that affects the feet. The situation got so bad that a woman had to be carried out by the group on the last day because she couldn't walk. No matter how prepared people are for the Darien Gap, in the end, survival mostly comes down to luck. Out there, travelers won't find cities with solid infrastructure where they can crash at a hotel and gear up for the next day. In some spots, they might stumble across basic camps right in the jungle. These camps might offer wooden platforms for tents, bucket showers, toilets, and even plates of chicken and rice. But it all comes at a price. Wi-Fi, for example, might cost $2 an hour, and that seems like a pretty good deal, considering there's no cell phone service on the trail. They pretty much lose all contact with the outside world. Now picture a dense rainforest with steep, muddy terrain. The hiking trail is littered with boulders and tangled with vines, like nature's own tripwires. It climbs sharply over a mountain, becoming a serious challenge even for someone in good physical shape. The area also gets constant heavy rainfall, which can lead to landslides, flash flooding, and extremely muddy conditions. The situation gets so intense that even the t-shirts and faces of those who make the crossing end up covered in mud. They'll also have to cross a lot of fast-moving rivers. A Venezuelan dad who recently went through the area with his 2 kids said their sneakers ripped apart on the very first day. That's how powerful the rivers can be. And they're deep, too. Sometimes the water reaches all the way up to their shoulders. But the dangers in that area aren't recent. For centuries, the Darien Gap was thought to be impossible to cross. The first Europeans who ventured into Latin America saw it as kind of a jungle training school. They totally knew about its dangers, but still, many adventurers tried to make the crossing in the years that followed. In 1854, for example, an expedition disappeared for 49 days in the jungle, battling starvation and exhaustion. Then again, in 1870, a group of 100 men set out to cross it. Even though they were well prepared and carried cutting-edge equipment for the time, they still suffered tremendously during the journey. They had to rely on incredible resilience to survive the challenge. Over the years, people who ventured in often ended up passing away from hunger, thirst, and even drowning in rivers. They also faced the risk of being attacked by dangerous animals like jaguars, white-lipped pecaries, and the fer-de-lance, a fast, irritable snake that is one of the most venomous out there. The area is also swarming with mosquitoes, which can spread serious health problems. Leaning against trees to rest can also be risky. This jungle is full of spiked chunga palm trees, which are covered in long black spines up to 8 inches long. Unfortunately for us, these spines are covered in all sorts of bacteria. Just brush against a chunga, and you could end up with infected wounds. And yet another danger is getting lost in the dense forest and never finding your way back to safety. These days, though, this risk is a lot lower. Some people have mentioned color-coded markers that help guide travelers and keep them from going the wrong way. If they see blue or green fabric tied to trees, it means keep walking. But if they spot red fabric, that's a sign they're going the wrong way and need to turn around quickly. Since there are so many dangers, why not just build a road through the Darien Gap? While it might seem like a good idea, building a road connecting Panama and Colombia isn't really that simple. The Darien Gap has a humid climate, tough terrain, and constant rainfall, which means any attempt to build a functional road would be highly challenging and super expensive. Even though there have been previous attempts to fill in the gap. See, there's a huge road system called the Pan-American Highway, which stretches all the way from Alaska to the southern tip of Argentina. Nowadays, this highway hits a roadblock right at the Darien Gap. But it wasn't supposed to be like this, as the original idea was for the road to go through there. Leaders from Latin American countries tried to make this plan happen in the 70s, and then again in the 90s. But a lot of people were against it, mainly because they wanted to protect the local communities and the rainforest. Since the Darien Gap is mostly untouched by humans, it's one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. It's believed that 1 in 5 species are endemic to the region, meaning they only exist in that specific area, like the Darien pocket gopher and the slatty slender mouse opossum. A road would have really damaged the ecosystem in the area, so the plans were scrapped. Eventually, an alternative was created to travel by sea. At least 2 companies started a ferry service connecting the 2 countries. However, the business wasn't profitable, and they ended up shutting down. Not long ago, Panama decided to close the Darien Gap route. Now they're sealed off with barbed wire fencing. It might just be a matter of time before other routes are created. But if you are an adventurer looking to visit South America, it's probably not best to wait for that. Traveling by plane to Colombia will always be a much safer option.
There's a stretch of water that even the most experienced explorers fear. No matter what season you choose to cross it in, you risk meeting face-to-face with waves that can reach as tall as the Hollywood sign. I'm talking about the Drake Passage, the waterway connecting the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, stretching from Cape Horn at South America's southernmost tip to Antarctica's South Shetland Islands. It's about as wide as the distance from London to Berlin and takes up to 48 hours to cross. Some sailors compare getting on the other side to going to the moon. That's how challenging it is. Even the man who discovered it, Sir Francis Drake, never sailed these waters because they seemed too dangerous to him and opted for a calmer, although longer, Strait of Magellan. The passage took the lives of around 20,000 sailors and over 800 ships. Tourists who want to see Antarctica cross the Drake Passage on a regular basis, although it's still often called the world's most terrifying ocean crossing. The Antarctic Peninsula, where travelers go, isn't really part of Antarctica itself. It sticks out and points towards South America like 2 fingers almost touching it. The water gets squeezed between these 2 landmasses, making strong ocean currents. The passage is part of the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the largest ocean current on Earth. The water rushes through the passage at a speed between 95 and 150 million cubic meters per second, which makes it rougher. And then there are winds that usually blow from west to east and are very strong between 40 and 60 degrees latitude. That's why those areas are called the Roaring Forties, Furious 50s, and Screaming 60s. Land slows down winds, which is why storms hitting Ireland and the UK get weaker as they move east. But Drake's latitude is the only place where winds can blow all around the Earth without being stopped by land. So they keep getting faster. These strong winds turn into huge waves that can hit ships really hard, normally around 13 to 16 feet tall. They're much higher than waves in the Atlantic. Drake Passage also has underwater mountains that you can't see. The huge current squeezes through this narrow passage and causes waves to crash against these mountains underwater. These internal waves create whirls that bring cold water up from the deep ocean. So it's not just rough on the surface, the water is wild all the way down. The first sailor managed to sail around Cape Horn and through the Drake Passage in 1616. It was a Dutch navigator, Willem Schouten, in 1616. But the most famous attempt to cross it was undertaken by Sir Ernest Henry Shackleton on his ship named Endurance. He and 27 of his men set off from South Georgia, aiming to reach Vassal Bay in Antarctica. But things didn't go as planned. On January 19, 1915, their ship got stuck in the ice. And by October, it began to sink. They camped on floating ice for 2 months before sailing lifeboats to a remote, icy place called Elephant Island. Shackleton and 5 men made a risky journey to South Georgia to get help. It took them 15 days to cross Drake Passage with hurricane winds. Finally, they arrived safely and organized a rescue for the rest of their crew. Scientists found the shipwreck of Endurance only in 2022, 10,000 feet below the water. In December of 2019, 6 fearless athletes decided to cross the Drake Passage by rowing a boat for the first time in history. It took them 12 days of non-stop rowing with a 90-minute rotation of rowers. They managed to do it, and it was probably the hardest possible way to cross the passage. The athletes mentioned it was cold, wet, and dirty, and the waves hit them like walls. The weather in the Drake Passage changes a lot, but ship captains can always see it coming and change their path. They will move the departure time to have a safety margin and not to get stuck in the middle of the passage in the worst possible conditions. Sometimes, the journey will be smooth and calm, and they call it Drake Lake. Other times, people on the ship will feel rough waves, which is called Drake Shake. Some experienced captains who often cross the passage say that the Drake Lake effect happens once in every 10 crossings, and they see the Drake Shake once or twice in every 10 journeys. A schooner or a kayak will probably not survive the journey among giant waves, but modest vessels and cruise ships have sturdy hulls and advanced stabilizing mechanisms. So, the journey isn't that dangerous anymore, but still, it's quite an adventure, especially if you're seasick. If you don't feel like risking it but want to travel from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean by water the fast way, the Panama Canal is waiting for you. People first started thinking about making a water path across Panama in the 16th century. Back then, a Spanish explorer found out that only a thin piece of land separated the two oceans. But it seemed impossible to build it because of the mountains and thick jungle, so the idea had to wait a couple of centuries. Finally, in 1880, France, led by the man who built the Suez Canal in Egypt, tried to make the canal. But the people who started the construction soon found out it was much harder than it looked on a map. The land in Panama was one of the toughest and most dangerous places to dig a big waterway. Workers had to literally move huge mountains in a jungle full of snakes, where it was really hot and rainy. During the wet season, heavy rain turned rivers into wild rapids and soaked the workers. Sometimes, they didn't see the sun for 2 weeks, and their clothes stayed wet all the time. Big rocks were falling, and tiny mosquitoes that carried malaria made people very sick. And then, an earthquake happened on top of everything. They were losing thousands of people. That's why France decided to abandon the project after 7 years. Then, the United States bought the French assets in the canal zone and finished it by 1914. It cost the US around $375 million. The 50-mile-long passage of water saves ships traveling between New York and San Francisco 7,872 miles. Around 14,000 ships use it every year and pay around $1.8 million in tolls. So it looks like it all paid off. Another challenging waterway in this part of the world is the Amazon River. It's around 4,300 miles long and flows through 3 countries with over 30 million people living in its basin. But there isn't a single bridge across it. The river has many marshes and soft soils, so engineers would need to build very long bridges and very deep foundations, which costs a lot of money. Building bridges over deep water is tough, but in other places in the world, engineers can use things like floating platforms to help. The river's path and water levels change a lot during the year. During the dry season from June to November, the river is usually 2 to 6 miles wide. But in the wet season from December to April, the river can become as wide as 30 miles. And the water level can rise by 50 feet. That's why they can't build floating bridges or pontoons. The riverbanks are made of soft dirt that moves and erodes with the seasons, and it makes things even harder. It would have to be an absolutely unique project to overcome all these challenges. Luckily, there's no pressing need for a bridge across the Amazon right now. The river mostly goes through areas that are sparsely populated, so there aren't so many major roads to be connected by bridges. Take a look at Australia from space. Nothing unusual, right? But now, focus on the northern territory of the continent. If we imagine it through magnetic sensors, we notice, whoa, see that? An unknown strange thing that mirrors the outline of Australia itself. It looks almost the same, but smaller. It's like a twin of the continent hidden deep within it. But what is it? Volcanic lakes? Gold deposits? No, it's something far stranger. This is a magnetic anomaly. Yeah, you're probably confused, but let's find out what's going on with Australia. So, there are devices called magnetometers. They measure magnetic fields, and geologists use them for many things, including exploring the interior of our planet. The magnetic field comes from various metals and minerals buried deep underground. It travels upwards, and scientists' sensors detect it. One day, they equipped aircraft with these magnetometers and flew over the northern part of Australia. When they processed the data and identified a magnetic anomaly with clear geological boundaries, whatever lay in Australia's interior was emitting magnetic signals and followed the outline of the entire continent. And because these signals come from deep rocks, scientists think that valuable resources, including minerals and metals, might be hidden there. But beyond potential resources, what else does this tell us? Inside these rocks, there could be volcanic materials formed over 1.5 billion years ago, minerals that formed long before the dinosaurs appeared. This entire mass of material could tell scientists about our planet's history and how the Australian continent was formed. Okay, that sounds cool, but why are those changes in the magnetic field they detected called an anomaly? Why is it magnetic in the first place? And how does this magnetism work? To understand, we first need to grasp what Earth's magnetic field is. And this is one of the most amazing and mysterious things in the world. The magnetic field is invisible, yet without it, we couldn't exist. So, in simple terms, Earth's magnetic field is our protective blanket, shielding us from cosmic radiation, charged solar particles, and the solar wind. Without the magnetic field, our Earth would be like Mars, a barren desert where life most likely couldn't have emerged. But where does it come from? The magnetic field is generated deep within our planet, where molten nickel and iron create electrical currents. Combined with our planet's rotation, these electrical flows generate the magnetic field that protects us. In addition, minerals and metals inside rocks can produce magnetic fields too. But what exactly is this force? Take two magnets from your fridge and try to push them together. Feel that resistance? That repulsion happens because their magnetic fields are interacting. In some places, this magnetic field can be weaker, and in others, stronger. This means that deep within the planet, in those locations, there are geological processes happening that change the stable behavior of the magnetic field. These places are what we call magnetic anomalies. One of them lies beneath the northern part of Australia. However, the magnetic field is more than just a blanket. Thanks to it, many awesome things happen. For example, a compass needle always points north because the Earth's south magnetic pole is located there, attracting the magnet. Don't confuse the geographic and magnetic poles. The geographic North Pole is in the north, near the magnetic South Pole. It's not just humans who use the magnetic field for navigation. Animals can do it too, without any instruments or technology. Some animals sense the magnetic field, and this superpower is called magnetoreception. This ability helps animals during migration. That is, they know where north and south are. So when it gets cold, they can fly to where it's warm. For some turtles, magnetoreception helps them remember the location of feeding areas. Pigeons have a unique perception of the magnetic field too. In simple words, the magnetic field is also a giant navigation system for many creatures on Earth. Few people know, but we actually have a second magnetic field. In 2018, scientists published research describing how ocean tides create another magnetic layer. But why hadn't we noticed it before? Our main magnetic field, generated by the planet's core, is very strong. Its radiation extends into space and is easy to detect. The magnetic field from tides is almost 20,000 times weaker. How does this field affect the main one? What are its properties? Scientists continue to study these questions. Also, the magnetic field can control the brain. In 2017, scientists used magnetic fields to remotely activate brain cells in mice. Magnetic forces were directed at the parts of the mouse brain responsible for body movement. In this way, the scientists could make the rodent run, freeze, and turn around. But don't think this was done just for fun. Experiments like this can be very helpful for humanity. If you can make a small animal move, imagine what other changes might be possible in the brain. Improving psychological state, for example. Potentially, you could instantly switch from a bad, depressive mood to a happy one. This technology could help treat many diseases related to the brain and nervous system. You might think that such a technology could control you, but don't worry. Magnetic fields pass through your tissues with almost no effect. But then, how did they manage to control those mice? Scientists simply implanted tiny magnetic particles into the animals' brains. Under the influence of a magnetic field, these particles heated up and triggered the activation of neurons. But the coolest thing happens when the magnetic field collides with the solar wind, generating electrical currents and magnetic forces. At the moment, a true cosmic storm happens in the sky, and we see it in the form of beautiful auroras. Such storms are not only beautiful, but also destructive, as they can disrupt the operation of satellites and electronic devices. Sometimes this can lead to minor glitches in your GPS or internet connection on your phone. But there have been cases where magnetic storms were so massive, they led to catastrophic consequences. One of them occurred in 1859 and is known as the Carrington event. On September 1, 1859, an amateur sky watcher, Richard Carrington, noticed a sudden bright white flash on the sun. It turned out this flash was a massive ejection of plasma from the sun's upper atmosphere. About 17 hours later, part of this energy reached our planet and struck as a powerful storm. All telegraph systems at the time went down. The northern lights were visible not only to residents of northern regions, but also in the tropics. For many people who had never heard of or seen the northern lights, this was a real surprise. What must they have thought? The end of the world? Unknown forces from space? Many were undoubtedly shocked by the spectacle, but the real shock was inside major cities. Communication between telegraph systems was stopped. The world was plunged into an eerie silence. Sparks flew from telegraph machines, causing fires in some places. People couldn't send or receive important information. Fortunately, the consequences weren't too catastrophic. Communication technologies were just beginning to develop at that time. But what would happen if such an event occurred today? Many experts have estimated that the damage from a similar storm in the United States could reach up to $2.6 trillion. The entire internet would shut down. For a while, we would lose access to our messaging apps, our banks, our navigation systems. Contactless payments, airports, train stations, and much more would stop working. We would be cut off not only from the internet, but also from electricity for a long time. The entire planet would be plunged into darkness and silence. A global economic and humanitarian crisis would begin. It's hard to imagine the damage that AI would suffer. But don't worry, the good news is that storms like this happen roughly once every 500 years, and smaller ones about every 50 years. But these aren't precise forecasts, since it's quite difficult for scientists to predict the sun's behavior. Besides, we wouldn't just sit in shock after such an event, we would immediately begin dealing with the consequences. The impact on modern civilization from such a storm would be significant, but we would surely recover quickly. Australia feels like the safest place on Earth, geologically speaking. No megavolcanoes, no massive fault lines slicing cities in half, no constant earthquake alerts. It looks solid and unbreakable, but according to a brand new global stress map of Earth's crust, Australia is one of the most internally stressed pieces of land on the entire planet. It's not shaking or cracking yet, but it's quietly storing energy like a bent ruler about to snap. To understand why this is such a big deal, imagine Earth's crust like a giant jigsaw puzzle made of moving slabs called tectonic plates. These plates float on softer rock below and push, pull, or grind against each other. Where plates meet, earthquakes and volcanoes make sense. But stress doesn't just stay at the edges, it travels. It builds up inside plates too, like pressure spreading through frozen ice when you squeeze it. Scientists mapped over 100,000 real stress measurements from oil wells, rock tests, and earthquakes to see where Earth is being squeezed the hardest right now. When they laid all the data together, the map lit up like a warning sign, and Australia stood out. This shocked scientists because Australia sits far away from plate boundaries, which usually means stability. But instead of relaxing, the Australian continent gets squeezed from multiple directions by nearby plates, especially the Pacific and Eurasian ones. The stress doesn't release easily, so it piles up inside the crust, and then nothing moves. Until suddenly everything does. One of the strangest discoveries showed up in places like the Bowen Basin, where stress directions twist and rotate underground. That's bad news because unpredictable stress behaves like glass about to shatter. These rotating stress fields make it nearly impossible to say when or where cracks could form. It could be years away or tomorrow. And human activity makes it even riskier. Drilling deep into the crust for geothermal energy or injecting fluids underground can nudge these stressed zones just enough to trigger fault movement. This doesn't mean Australia is about to split in half next week, but it does mean the idea of geologically safe might be outdated. Scientists now think Australia could eventually fracture internally and form new fault systems where none existed before. What makes the new stress map different from older models is that it doesn't just explain past earthquakes, it helps identify future risk zones before anything breaks. Countries can use this data to decide where drilling is safer, where tunnels shouldn't go, and where infrastructure needs reinforcement. But even with all this data, we still can't predict the exact moment Earth will snap. Stress maps tell us where the tension is. They don't tell us when it gives up. But this idea of continents quietly tearing themselves apart isn't just theory. Africa gives us the clearest real-world example. It's slowly unzipping itself. So slowly that no human will ever wake up and see a new ocean where land used to be, but fast enough that scientists can actually measure it happening right now. Deep beneath East Africa, the ground stretches, thins, and pulls apart as if the continent is taking a deep breath and never fully exhaling. And over millions of years, that stretch could turn into an ocean. This whole process centers on something called the East African Rift System, or EARS for short. Think of it like a giant tear running through the continent, thousands of miles long, cutting through countries like Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique. It's one of the biggest rift zones on Earth. A rift zone is exactly what it sounds like, a place where the planet's crust is being pulled apart instead of squeezed together. And Africa just happens to have one of the most dramatic examples anywhere on the planet. What's really happening is that Africa isn't one solid plate anymore. It's splitting into two massive chunks, the Nubian plate to the west and the Somalian plate to the east. These two plates are drifting away from each other at a speed that sounds laughable, just less than an inch per year. That's about the speed your fingernails grow. But give that process millions of years and suddenly continents don't look so permanent anymore. In 2018, photos of a giant split in Kenya went viral across the internet. Headlines screamed that Africa was splitting in half right now. It looked dramatic, but that moment didn't mean Africa suddenly broke overnight. That rupture was more like a surface ripple, a small local sign of a much bigger process that's been going on for around 25 million years. And if we could travel in time to 5 or 10 million years from now, we would probably see the crust thin enough for seawater to rush in. When or if that happens, East Africa would slowly peel away from the rest of the continent, and a brand new ocean basin would form between the two plates. Africa would lose its eastern shoulder, and maps of the world would need a serious update. As strange as that sounds, it's actually totally normal for Earth. The planet never stops reshaping itself. It just works on a timeline so slow that our brains struggle to process it. The continents we know today feel ancient and permanent, but they're basically temporary arrangements. About 138 million years ago, South America and Africa were locked together like puzzle pieces. You can still see it if you look at their coastlines. They match almost perfectly. East Africa drifting away will just be the next chapter in that story. Australia's story could follow a different path, but the physics are similar. Stress builds, rock resists, then the rock fails. and stress doesn't care about borders, cities, or how calm the surface looks. That's why scientists are so concerned about something called SH max, the direction of maximum horizontal stress. In simple terms, it tells us which way the Earth is squeezing the hardest underground. If that squeezing lines up with existing fractures, earthquakes become more likely. If it cuts across old faults, new ones can form. Turkey is another place where the stress map practically screams danger. The country sits where Arabian, Eurasian, and African tectonic plates collide. There's also a smaller Anatolian plate on which Turkey is located, and which gets squeezed westward like toothpaste, grinding against massive faults. The stress map shows SH max pointing in directions that load these faults perfectly. Now, researchers looked at ancient lava flows near one of Turkey's faults and realized they weren't random. Lava sheets once flowed smoothly across the land, cooled into solid rock, and then got pulled apart over time, like a snapped chocolate bar. That gave scientists a rare, clear snapshot of how continents deform from the inside out. To date the lava, the team used microscopic zircon crystals trapped inside it. These crystals work like natural stopwatches. They trap helium created by radioactive decay, and by measuring that helium, scientists can tell when the lava erupted and cooled. When they combine that with satellite images and remote sensing, the scientists managed to see Earth's slow-motion movements. The Tuzgolu Fault stretches more than 120 miles and is so massive that you can spot it from space. For years, scientists assumed it behaved like many of Turkey's dangerous faults, where land slides sideways past itself. But this new research flipped that idea on its head. The fault isn't sliding, it's slowly ripping open. The land on either side moves away from each other at less than an inch per year. That sounds tiny, but then again, over thousands or millions of years, that motion adds up to continents literally thinning and breaking. And since the fault sits where three massive tectonic plates meet, this matters way beyond Turkey. All this once again reminds us that continents don't just collide or slide. Sometimes they stretch until they snap. And places that look calm on the surface might already be under invisible strain, inch by inch, year after year, rewriting the map long before anyone feels the shake.
So, a few years ago, in 2019, folks in Australia said they liked an old idea with a new twist, using extra floodwater from the north to help dry areas in the west and south. This plan got the name of the New Brainfield Scheme. It was based on an old idea from the 1930s. The idea was to catch floodwater from the north and move it to the south and west. But the original plan never actually happened. Over the years, lots of experts said it wouldn't work. They thought it was too expensive and too tricky to build, even though it could potentially help fix drought problems in dry parts of Queensland. The original idea appeared a long time ago, when an engineer named John Brainfield got a big idea. He wanted to take floodwater from rivers in northern Queensland and send it inland to Lake Erie, one of the driest spots in Australia. He planned to use dams, pumps, really big pipes, and even tunnels to transport all that water over the Great Dividing Range, a big mountain range in Australia. The biggest dam would have been called Hell's Gate, and Brainfield wanted it twice as tall as what it was originally planned. This way, pumps and gravity could help move the water over the Great Dividing Range. The water would then flow south and help irrigate farmland near places like Hughenden. It would change the weather, make it rain more, and turn the dry land into green farms. Eventually, it would reach Lake Erie, turning the desert into a green growing area. That way, Australia could grow more food, sell it to other countries, and make more jobs. He hoped that the area could turn into a food bowl for the country. For some time, people talked about the plan a lot. They loved the idea. They thought it could change how farming worked. And some even believed that nature had already planned for the land to be filled with water. Dry rivers and lake beds were just waiting to be used. They even said that rains fell on the wrong side of the mountains, and Brainfield's plan could fix that. But when the authorities looked into this idea, they found big problems, and the main one was that the plan would cost too much. Plus, there weren't enough scientists or engineers to do a full investigation. The land was too dry and harsh. No one was sure it would even work, like how much water would really get there. Plus, some of Brandfield's measurements were wrong, especially the dam heights. So, in 1947, they officially shut the project down, claiming that even if they built the project, it wouldn't be worth it. After all, even places next to oceans, like parts of Chile, still stay bone dry, so a big lake might not result in more rain. And still, in 2019, one political party brought the idea back with an updated version called the new Brandfield scheme. They wanted to try it again, but with some changes to make it work better. Their plan included the following steps. Take water from the South Johnstone, Tully, Herbert, and Burdekin rivers. Store that water using a big dam called Hell's Gate Dam, but this time they wanted to make the dam twice as tall as in the original plan. Let the water flow through tunnels using gravity instead of using lots of pumps. Move the water under the mountains and into the Warrego River in southern Queensland. Use the water to grow crops in dry places south and west of Hughenden, a huge area even bigger than Tasmania, eventually turning it into a food bowl. At the same time, they didn't say how much the whole project would cost, but they promised to spend $20 million to let Australia's National Science Agency check if the plan could work. Those innovative ideas sounded good, but for over 80 years, loads of experts kept saying, "Nope, it won't work." Why? Brandfield said his idea would cost £40 million back in 1941. That's about $3.2 billion today. But the new version of the plan might cost more than $15 billion and take over 10 years to build. Also, people who care about nature are worried. They explain that taking water away from where it usually goes could hurt animals and plants. It might let invasive plants and animals spread to new places. It might mess up rivers and oceans, where fish and other animals live. It could even hurt towns and businesses near the coast that depend on those natural water flows. Still, some people really believed in the idea and thought it was worth doing, especially to help farmers and fix drought problems. However, in 2022, the government decided to stop trying to fix the drought in western Queensland with the Brandfield scheme. Experts looked closely at the plan and said it just wouldn't work. The problem? There's not enough water all the time to make it happen. Apparently, the new cost of the plan would have been over $30 billion. That's a huge amount of money. You could buy yourself a fleet of private jets and luxurious yachts, and more. So, experts said you'd need lots and lots of water to spend that kind of money, but the water just isn't there. Now, instead of one huge project, they suggested doing smaller water projects closer to where the rain and waterfalls are. These smaller projects, called mini Brandfield grids, would be in 4 places along the Queensland coast. Those little grids could share water when some places had more or less rain. Other scientists looked at the plan too, and they agreed. Even if things went super well, the Brandfield scheme would still cause problems and cost way too much, while the mini water grids project looks more plausible. They think the dry parts west of the mountains will do better without the full-scale Brandfield scheme. There are easier and cheaper ways to help those places grow and get water. So the big plan was dropped, and now they're looking at smarter, smaller ideas to help with water and farming. And the matter is quite urgent. Australia is a super dry place, one of the driest places people actually live in. When there's a drought, there's not much water around. That means farms don't grow as much food, and that can cause a lot of problems. In the future, droughts are likely to happen more often and be worse. That's why it's necessary to start getting ready now. Experts are working on something called the Drought Resilience Mission, trying to figure out how to deal with droughts better in the future. One of them looked at how much droughts actually cost Australia. His research shows that droughts can hurt a lot of things – farms, jobs, towns, and even the whole country. When there's no rain for a really long time, some towns can actually run out of water. That's called day zero. It's when the taps in people's houses get turned off because there's just no water left. In 2020, a town in Queensland called Stanthorpe hit day zero. About 50 other towns were really close too. When such a situation happens, the only way to get water is by bringing it in with trucks, and that's super expensive. Stanthorpe had to get around 20 trucks of water every day for a year and a half. It cost them about $800,000 every month. In the end, they spent over $14 million just to have water. Luckily, it started raining again and filled the dams back up. But the authorities are working on ways to stop this kind of thing from happening again. They want to help towns be ready so they never run out of water like that. Because drought just doesn't mess with water, it can also mess with people's health. When everything dries up, plants vanish and the soil gets loose. Then the wind picks it up and makes huge dust storms. Those dust clouds can blow really far, even into such big cities as Sydney. That's what happened in 2018. The air got so bad that kids, older people, and anyone with breathing problems had to be extremely careful. The dust ruined some crops and made different foods, even fruit, unsafe to eat.
The world's largest fence spans over 3,100 miles from Queensland to South Australia. If stretched out, it could easily connect London to New York. And if you'd walk next to it, you'd need 6 months to complete the journey. It wasn't built to safeguard the Australian border. Why would it, since Aussies are just surrounded by water? It wasn't meant to protect some important building either. Its purpose is to keep some animal species away from each other. It was back in the late 1800s when Australians started building parts of this fence. They wanted to create a barrier separating the lively, bustling part of the country where cities like Melbourne and Sydney thrive from the harsh, dry outback. They used wooden posts dug deep into the ground, linked up with wire mesh standing about 6 feet tall. Some parts of the fence even have a second electrically charged layer. To make sure this fence did its job, they added some red and white lights to help guard things even at night. A team of over 20 people work full-time to keep things in check here. And every year, local authorities chip in around $750,000 to keep the construction in shape. Why all this trouble? The main reason was dingoes. These gingery, wolf-like creatures are Australia's largest carnivore mammals, and they're also apex predators. They were causing a lot of trouble to local farmers, especially in southern Queensland, where they often go after sheep. For the most part, the fence has been doing its job okay, but it's not foolproof. Some dingoes still manage to sneak through. Other times, wild camels end up crashing into it. That's because Australia has quite a massive camel population roaming around. But this man-made solution did more than locals expected. They thought there would just be fewer dingoes within the fence, but fewer dingoes mean more kangaroos. And more kangaroos mean more competition with the sheep for food. It's not just the bigger species feeling the squeeze. The smaller animals and the greenery also went through changes. With all this competition in a smaller space, locals noticed less diversity in the plant life and small animals. The soil became less nutritious over time, affecting plant growth. Plus, the fence acts as a roadblock for animal migration and seed dispersal. Even the sand dunes are feeling the effects, with less grass cover to hold things together. When scientists looked at kangaroos on both sides of the fence, they noticed that the young pups inside were lighter and tinier on average. The outsiders had bigger feet and heads for their age, and it wasn't because they were eating a different diet. The kangaroos that were stuck sharing the land with dingoes had to bulk up faster to survive. On the flip side, those inside the fence took it slower because they weren't under the same type of pressure. These had to compete with a lot of other creatures for food, so a bigger size wasn't a priority anymore. Researchers are still not sure if this difference is a quick fix or a long-term gene adaptation. What about domesticating dingoes? Wouldn't that help? Many think dingoes were once pets in Australia, but it's not known for sure. These days, they're pretty wild, just like wolves, hyenas, or coyotes. Most of them don't need packs to survive and are solitary hunters with sharp instincts built in. So taming them isn't going to be easy. Still, taking down the construction is not an option for now. Australians are so strict when it comes to making sure dingoes are kept away that they even put laws in place for people who mess up with the fence. Leaving a crossing gate open can put people behind bars for up to 3 months. Damaging the fence can cost people 6 months' worth of their freedom. It wasn't the first time Australians thought a fence could help with animal issues. Before they needed it for dingoes, they experienced a serious bunny invasion. Cute as they are, rabbits were damaging the land used for farming, so locals thought of a 3-part fence. The first one stretched all the way from Ravensthorpe in the south to Pardue Station on the Pilbara coast. It was over 1,100 miles long, making it the longest unbroken fence globally at the time. All these bunny problems could have been traced back to a man named Thomas Austin. Back in 1859, when he first came to the land down under, he thought it would be a good idea to release a few rabbits into the wild, thinking it would add a bit of charm to the place. But since rabbits aren't native to Australia, they didn't have any natural predators at the time. They're also pretty adaptive creatures, needing just some grass for feeding. They reproduce at astonishing speeds too. A mama rabbit can have 4 litters a year, with as many as 5 bunnies each. Pretty soon, their numbers boomed. By the late 1880s, the bunnies had caused so much damage that local authorities came up with a proposal. They'd offer the equivalent of almost $2 million today to anyone who could come up with a solution to this long-eared problem. Nobody claimed the prize, but a commission did gather a bit over a decade later and came up with the fence idea. Maintaining those fences was complicated. They had inspectors keeping an eye, with each one responsible for a stretch about 500 miles long. There were also these boundary riders patrolling smaller sections, using bikes at first, then switching to camels or using camels to haul buggies. They even tried using cars at one point, but they couldn't handle the rough terrain and constantly had punctured tires. In terms of its effectiveness, well, by 1902, rabbits were already hanging out on the wrong side of the fence. That's why, 4 years later, they put up another one. It worked for a while, so much so that the local authorities didn't bother helping out farmers past that second fence with rabbit netting loans. Those caught between the 2 fences, however, still had a rough time dealing with rabbit trouble. Soon enough, rabbits spread even over fence number 2, and it was clear the solution didn't work. In some areas, even while the fences were being built, those sneaky bunnies found their way past them. To this day, the rabbit population still sometimes puts the Australian officials through rough times. The dingo fence may be the longest one, but it's not the weirdest. The aquarium fence in Turkey might take that prize. This 164-foot aquarium fence was built to make sure the expensive villa's ocean view would be visible from every one of its levels. These days, it gathers a lot of tourists from all over the world, eager to see the variety of fish it contains, and even the octopuses. Putting up a see-through structure wasn't hard. The real challenge was connecting the aqua fence to the Aegean Sea through a buried pipeline stretching across 13,000 feet of land. This ensures water constantly flows, keeping the aquarium clean and the fish happy. To make sure no one damages the delicate fence or steals any of the fish or 2, the owner also invested in security. He installed a network of 17 cameras equipped with facial recognition. Visitors are free to look and take pictures, but step too close and you're likely to trigger alarms. Another one of those weird fences is New Zealand's bra fence. If you ever find yourself through central Otago, you might stumble upon a fence adorned with bras of all kinds of shapes, sizes, and patterns. Its story takes us back to 1999, when people in the area found 4 bras mysteriously hanging on the fence near Cardrona Valley Road. Some were a bit surprised, but then others started adding their bras to the decor. Some more bras appeared, and it became a must-see spot for tourists. Its popularity was so high that at times it caused traffic problems in the area. Turkey is quietly tearing itself open, and no one noticed for decades. Scientists didn't just get a detail wrong, they misunderstood the entire motion of a massive chunk of Earth's crust. what they thought was sliding sideways is actually stretching apart, inch by inch, like the planet is slowly pulled in two. And once you see that rupture, you start noticing them everywhere. To understand why this shocked geologists so badly, picture Earth's crust like a cracked shell floating on something hot and squishy underneath. Those cracked pieces are tectonic plates. They move a few inches per year, which sounds tiny, but over millions of years, it reshapes continents. Turkey sits in one of the most uncomfortable places on Earth, squeezed between three huge plates: Eurasia to the north, Africa to the south, and Arabia pushing in from the southeast like an elbow in a crowded bus. For decades, scientists believe Turkey survived this squeeze by sliding sideways. This type of movement is called a strike-slip fault, which basically means two chunks of land grind past each other like hands rubbing together. Turkey has famous ones, like the North Anatolian Fault, which produces horrible earthquakes. That model felt neat and logical. Pressure comes in, land escapes sideways. Problem solved. Or so everyone thought. But geology doesn't always follow neat models made up by humans. There is a long fracture running beneath salt flats and farmland under central Turkey. It never behaved like the dangerous sideways faults, so it got less attention. Then researchers from Curtin University decided to look closer. And instead of watching earthquakes, they watched lava. Ancient lava. Lava that flowed across the fault thousands of years ago, cooled into solid rock, and later ruptured apart. There are tiny crystals called zircons inside that lava. They're basically nature's stopwatches. Zircons trap radioactive elements that decay in a predictable rate, so scientists can tell exactly when the lava cooled. When they matched lava chunks on opposite sides of the fault and measured how far they drifted apart, the team managed to reconstruct how the fault was moving over thousands of years. It turned out that the fault wasn't sliding sideways at all. It was slowly and steadily pulling apart, just a fraction of an inch per year. That's thinner than a grain of rice, but over geological time, it's massive. This type of fault is called an extensional fault, which means the crust stretches until it thins and breaks. In simple terms, Turkey isn't just being squeezed, it's being torn open. And as if that wasn't dramatic enough, the story gets worse. Other studies show that parts of Turkey's crust aren't just stretching, they're dripping downward into the mantle. When dense chunks of crust get heavy enough, they peel off and sink like blobs of wax in a lava lamp. Scientists call it lithospheric dripping, and this process is basically Earth quietly losing pieces of itself. When that happens, the surface above weakens. The land rises, sinks, fractures, and rearranges. Earthquakes don't always need plates to slam together. Sometimes the ground fails because its support system melts away from below. That's why Turkey's geology now looks less like a solid slab and more like stretched taffy over a fire. Turkey isn't alone with the tectonic drama. Africa is unzipping itself so slowly that no human will ever wake up to a brand new ocean outside their window, yet fast enough that scientists can measure it happening right now. Deep beneath East Africa, the ground stretches and thins. Over millions of years, that constant stretch doesn't just rupture rocks, it rewrites geography. And it can literally create an ocean where solid land once stood. All of this focuses on something called the East African Rift System. This rift runs thousands of miles across places like Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique, and it ranks among the largest rift zones on Earth. A rift zone is where the planet's crust is being pulled apart instead of being squished together. Africa doesn't just have a rift zone, but one of the most extreme versions anywhere, and it's been stretching for tens of millions of years, like a slow-motion disaster movie. And the continent isn't one solid piece anymore. It's splitting into two massive tectonic plates. The Nubian plate sits to the west, the Somalian plate to the east, and they're drifting apart at less than an inch per year, which sounds like a joke until you realize your fingernails grow at about the same speed. But just like in Turkey, this tiny movement adds up over millions of years. Back in 2018, photos of a massive rupture in Kenya caused chaos over the internet, and headlines panicked everyone with the news that Africa was splitting in half. The image looked intense, but it didn't mean the continent snapped overnight like a broken cookie. A much deeper process has been going on for about 25 million years already. And if we could jump another 5 or 10 million years into the future, we'd probably watch the crust stretch so thin that seawater finally rushes in and fills the gap. While Africa is tearing apart vertically, like a slow zipper, India could be splitting in a totally different way, horizontally into two giant layers, each about 60 miles thick, right as it crashes into Eurasia. And this collision is what gave us the Himalayas and the massive Tibetan plateau sitting behind them like a high-altitude backstage area. Everyone agrees on the basics. India has been creeping north for over 60 million years at about the speed your hair grows, slamming into Eurasia and forcing rock upward until it turned into the tallest mountains on Earth. What no one fully agreed on was how Tibet got so insanely high. Some scientists thought India was too buoyant to sink and just slid underneath Eurasia. Others imagined the plate buckling like a sheet of paper pushed into a wall. Then a third idea showed up and changed the vibe completely. This new theory says the Indian plate is delaminating, which means its top layer peels away and props up Tibet. At the same time, the heavier bottom layer sinks into the mantle, the hot semi-molten layer beneath Earth's crust. Scientists can't drill that deep to check, so they followed a clue instead: helium leaking from Tibetan hot springs. Helium-3 is incredibly rare and mostly comes from deep inside Earth, and helium-4 forms closer to the surface. When researchers measured gases from hundreds of springs, they found helium-3 leaking out in northern Tibet. It means that the mantle sits dangerously close to the surface there. Farther south, that signal disappears. So it most definitely means that the plate hasn't fully split yet. But we have earthquake patterns that line up with the same story, so it looks like India isn't just pushing mountains up. It's peeling itself apart from the inside while doing it. All these tectonic processes fit in well with the new massive global stress map. It shows where the planet is holding it together and where it's dangerously close to rupturing. Scientists built it from over 100,000 real stress measurements taken from boreholes, earthquakes, and field tests, which is more than double what we had less than a decade ago. Stress here means the invisible push and pull forces inside Earth's crust, the same forces that quietly load faults for years before one bad day turns into an earthquake. This map doesn't just help explain earthquakes, but also not to mess things up ourselves. If you drill a tunnel, inject carbon underground, or build a geothermal plant without knowing which way the rocks want to snap, you're basically poking a sleeping dragon. Engineers use this stress data to decide how to angle wells and tunnels so they don't accidentally cause failures. Basically, we're finally getting a live dashboard for Earth's breaking points, and that's a big deal when you live on the surface of a restless planet. For a long time, we treated continents like rigid boards floating on soup. Now they look more like stressed muscles, flexing, tearing, healing, and tearing again. It shows that the planet under your feet isn't finished. It's still under construction.
India could split horizontally into two parts as it runs into Eurasia. The movement of the Indian plate that includes most of modern South Asia is causing the Himalayas to grow. This process started around 60 million years ago when the plate first bumped into Eurasia. Scientists from the Netherlands have used the power of an AI simulator to see what this region will look like one day. The computer model showed that the Indian subcontinent will merge with the Horn of Africa in approximately 200 million years. The present-day cities of Mumbai and Mogadishu will become next-door neighbors. They will sit along the newly formed mountain chain scientists provisionally named the Somalaya. On the other side of this geological formation, Madagascar will connect with Sumatra, while Calcutta and the island of Mauritius will occupy the same region. Sri Lanka would cease to exist as it becomes part of the Indian mainland. Further to the north, Scientists predict that the Himalayas are going to increase in height in the foreseeable future. As the Indian plate continues to mile northward, there will be major changes to the surrounding landscape. The present fault line will drift further south. Tens of thousands of years in the future, there might be no Nepal. The Himalayan range will have expanded sideways to fully engulf the mountainous country. And there may be way more earthquakes in this part of the world because of this movement. Most researchers agree the speed at which India is moving northward into Eurasia is barely a tenth of an inch every year. Some of them think this is happening because of the plate's buoyancy. It prevents the Indian plate from sinking into the mantle, which gives Tibet its elevated topography. Other scholars believe that the structure is buckling under the pressure. The process resembles what happens to a sheet of paper when you push it horizontally against a wall. As you apply more pressure to its edge, the sheet starts to rise in the middle. In the real world, this bulge would be the Tibetan Plateau. A recent theory gives us the third explanation for the process. Their paper still has to undergo peer review, but the findings are intriguing. The international team of researchers introduced a new concept, the delamination of the Indian plate. This term simply means the separation of layers in a material that is supposed to be bonded together. Think of a sandwich that has cheese and ham slices between two buns. Take one of those layers out of the sandwich and you get delamination. In geological terms, this process involves the upper part of the plate peeling off and moving upwards. In the case of the Indian plate, this is the section that supports Tibet's elevation. The lower section is denser, which causes it to sink into the mantle. Plate tectonics are, in this way, similar to a layered cake. Chefs place the spongy, denser layer at the bottom, so the heavier top doesn't crush it. Scientists developed their thesis by analyzing helium gases in water samples from the region's hot springs. Helium-3 is a rare isotope that shows that the mantle is close to the surface of the Earth. Researchers measured helium isotope ratios at 200 Tibetan springs. The pattern they saw shows how close the mantle is to the northern Tibetan surface. Further to the south, they found plenty of helium-4, another isotope, which means that the plate is intact. It forms a barrier that helium-3 cannot penetrate, except in one region near Bhutan, in the eastern part of the Himalayas. The seismic activity in the region is good proof that delamination, the sandwich theory, is all real here. And it shows us that the mantle is intruding from the eastern side of the plateau. This concept puts under question the old, established ideas about tectonic plate behavior. The scientists behind the study suspect that the unique shape of the Indian plate contributes to the delamination process. It's the thickest at the northernmost point and the thinnest on the sides. If it's all true, it will mean that the continental collisions have a more dynamic and complex nature than geologists previously believed. Scientists still don't have enough hard evidence to prove the correctness of the new theory, just hints. Drilling to depths of over 60 miles is mechanically impossible right now. Such excavations are necessary to be 100% sure that the delamination process is going on. With the right technology, we would be able to better understand the hazards associated with earthquakes in the Asia-Pacific region. It's home to the famous Ring of Fire, where 75% of Earth's volcanoes are located. 9 out of 10 all earthquakes take place here. The India-Australia-Capricorn tectonic plate beneath the Indian Ocean is also important for solving Earth's tectonic mysteries. The term geophysicists use for such locations is nascent plate boundary. These are plates where tectonic plates are just starting to pull apart or push against each other. They represent the initial stage of a full-fledged plate boundary. Such a geological transformation unfolds at a pace of barely 5% of a single inch per year. That's about as long as a strand of spaghetti is wide. This shouldn't worry us too much from today's perspective. The India-Australia-Capricorn plate is destined to split in half over the course of tens of millions of years. Scientists from France studied records of 2 earthquakes that happened in 2012 and concluded there must be a nascent boundary there. Earthquakes normally occur at places where two or more tectonic plates meet. But the tremors in the Indian Ocean happened in the middle of the plate. The scientists used sonar scanning to map out the sea floor and see what was really going on there. After further examination of the marine area off the coast of Western Australia, researchers found a complex network of 62 pull-apart basins along a fracture zone. The scientific data backed up the idea that the tectonic plate was slowly but surely breaking apart. It's another proof that the outer layer of our planet is dynamic, not static. In some cases, you don't have to be a scientist to notice these powerful underground forces. Massive crevices emerged almost overnight due to heavy rainfall in a seismically active region in rural Kenya, first in 2018 and then again in 2023. The local population named the biggest of them the Grand Canyon. These events were not one-time incidents, but signals from the East African Rift System, part of the Great Rift Valley. This huge geological phenomenon stretching from Jordan to Mozambique shows us the gradual splitting of the African continent into two subcontinents. You can find rift valleys all around the world as proof of how tectonic plate movements are changing the planet. The East African Rift shows the underlying dynamics of the Nubian and Somali plates. The Nubian plate bears most of Africa, and the smaller Somali plate cradles the Horn of Africa. The two are gradually moving away from one another, which causes the formation of crevices within the rift valley. This process of continental rifting, going on at a rate slightly faster than the one in India, will eventually lead to the split of Africa into two continents. The whole process, which is about to happen in the next 10 to 50 million years, marks a significant geological event that reminds us of Earth's historical transformations. The last time our planet's geography changed so drastically was during the Jurassic period. The world map from the period looks recognizable, but the land masses were oddly positioned from the modern perspective. In the north, Eurasia was still loosely connected to North America, which was at the time called Laurasia. This landmass was slowly moving away from the supercontinent of Gondwana, further down south. It consisted of what we know today as Africa, South America, Australia, and Antarctica. At the time, the Indian plate was closer to Madagascar than to Eurasia, as it is today.
It started as a routine cleaning to scoop some mud off the coast of Indonesia, but turned into a discovery of remnants of a lost, submerged, Ice Age landmass. Archaeologists found more than 6,000 fossil fragments, and among them, 140,000-year-old Homo erectus remains. This find made scientists rethink how early humans lived, moved, and interacted in Southeast Asia. For years, they thought that Homo erectus on Java Island lived in isolation, separated from the rest of the world. But these dredged fossils blew that story apart. It turns out Java wasn't an island at all back then, but part of a landmass called Sundaland. So, Southeast Asia stretched out like someone had drained the ocean, connecting Indonesia, Malaysia, Borneo, Thailand, and Vietnam into one gigantic landscape. Today's islands of Java, Sumatra, Borneo, and Bali were connected by river systems that probably looked like the Amazon, by forests where giant animals roamed, and by coastal plains that would later sink beneath the ocean when temperatures went up. And Homo erectus were not stuck. They were thriving in what honestly sounds like prehistoric bliss. Yep, it was nothing like we normally imagine Ice Age, a sort of frozen wasteland. Sea levels dropped more than 400 feet because so much water froze into glaciers. When all that water got locked up in ice, whole sections of the ocean floor popped out of the water like stepping stones. Suddenly, early humans didn't need boats. They could literally walk from what's now mainland Southeast Asia all the way to places that are islands today. They could do it while exploring and chasing herds across open land. It was sort of like a giant prehistoric highway system. That giant highway matters because it completely rewrites how early humans moved around. Instead of being trapped, Homo erectus had a whole continent to roam. They followed rivers, crossed valleys, and adapted to different environments the same way you learn shortcuts to the office or find new routes to your favorite coffee shop. And because everything was connected, animals wandered freely too. Tigers, elephants, supersized cows, and turtles the size of small cars. People followed these big animals. This among the fossils pulled from the Madura Strait, such as cut-marked turtle shells and cracked open bovid bones. When you see precise cut marks on bone, it means someone was deliberately carving meat off the bone with tools they made themselves. And cracked bones mean they were taking out marrow, which was like prehistoric energy gel, rich, fatty, and perfect when you need calories to survive. That's a level of planning and skill scientists didn't expect from Homo erectus. It pushes Homo erectus closer to species like early Homo sapiens and Denisovans when it comes to behavior. It means they weren't just surviving on scraps, they were actively pursuing animals, processing, and maybe even sharing food the same way later humans did. So if you imagine them as slow, hunched cavemen, forget that. These people were sharp. The techniques they used to process food look eerily similar to those used by other hominins. Not just Homo erectus, we're talking Homo floresiensis, Denisovans, and early Homo sapiens. That opens the door to the possibility that these groups didn't just exist side by side. They might have interacted. Maybe they traded ideas and copied techniques. Or maybe they even interbred or shared territories. All this makes Southeast Asia look not like a series of isolated islands, but like a buzzing human ecosystem, a place where different human species crossed paths. And here's the heartbreaking part. Everything we know about this place, everything humans built, lost, and discovered there, is all underwater now. When the Ice Age ended, glaciers melted like forgotten ice cream cones on a hot sidewalk. Sea levels rose. Slowly, then quickly, rivers flooded, coastlines vanished. Entire human landscapes disappeared beneath the waves. Sundaland drowned over thousands of years, and the people who lived there either adapted or moved to higher ground. Archaeologists now try to interpret what these people did, how they lived, and how many human species walked that land. Every time they pull together bone or artifact from the seabed, we get one step closer to rewriting everything we thought we knew about early human migration. And the new discovery could mean that Southeast Asia may have been just as important to human evolution as Africa, the Middle East, or Europe. Looks like Sundaland wasn't a side quest, but a real mixing zone. A place where humanity experimented, adapted, learned, and evolved. Unexpected finds like this one in Indonesia keep popping up around the world and surprising scientists. Farmers in China were hoping to scoop up bat droppings for natural fertilizers inside a narrow limestone cave. But instead, they spotted pieces of fossilized bone that looked suspiciously like parts of a human skull. This skull turned out to be ridiculously old, around 300,000 years old. Scientists eventually named the fossil Maba 1. The discovery happened way back in 1958, but ever since then, nobody could agree on which ancient human species this skull belonged to. During the late Middle Pleistocene, the world was basically a crowded highway of different ancient human species wandering around. Or just maybe, Maba 1 came from a species we've never met before. The big issue was that researchers only found part of the skull, no jaw, no other bones. So it was like trying to solve a giant puzzle with half the pieces missing. For ages, scientists guessed it might be Neanderthal. But now they've used micro-CT scanning, which is like an X-ray superpower that lets you peek inside fossils without breaking them. That's when they noticed weird tube-like structures connecting parts of the brain case, something Neanderthals basically never had. The inside shape of the skull looked way more like Homo erectus, a much older human species. But even that wasn't a perfect match. The skull's size and shape were closer to modern humans and Neanderthals, and it showed traits Homo erectus usually didn't have. For example, it had a shorter forehead area and a thickened bregma, the meeting point between two skull bones. Maba 1 also had a strange dent on the forehead, almost like a bruise frozen in time. Whatever caused it, maybe a fall, maybe anemia, it happened while the person was alive. but there was no sign of infection, so that individual probably healed and kept living after whatever hit them. So Mabo 1 doesn't match any known species perfectly, but it shares features with several and has a similar mystery fossil vibe as others found across Africa. In 1976, a famous paleontologist and her team found another human-like skull in Tanzania. That skull had features that looked surprisingly similar to Homo sapiens, even though it was unbelievably old. Scientists think it may be one of the earliest examples of our species ever discovered. That means this skull could help solve one of science's biggest questions. When exactly did Homo sapiens first show up? The sediment layer where that skull was found goes all the way back to the Middle Pleistocene. That's way earlier than what old textbooks used to claim about when modern humans appeared. And then there's the skull that turned up in Zambia's Broken Hill ore mine. Miners literally stumbled on it, plus a few other bones, completely by accident. Scientists started calling it Rhodesian Man, and at first, everyone thought it might be the big missing link between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. But with newer research tools and better dating methods, they discovered it's around 299,000 years old and probably belonged to someone from the species Homo heidelbergensis. Every new fossil acts like a missing puzzle piece on the giant chaotic story of human evolution. Each one helps scientists connect species that once seemed unrelated, redraw family trees, and rewrite chapters of our past we didn't even know were wrong.
If you wander about 1,800 miles from Madagascar into the middle of, well, basically nowhere, you'll reach the Kerguelen Islands. This remote French territory is one of the most isolated places on Earth. There's no airport, no native population, not even Wi-Fi, just brutal winds, freezing rain, and rough seas. But this place also hides a massive secret beneath the water, because what you perceive above sea level is only the tip of something far bigger, the peaks of an enormous landmass that mostly sank into the ocean. We're talking about the Kerguelen Plateau, a lost, sunken continent. This is a big, mostly submerged volcanic plateau in the southern Indian Ocean. It sits about 1,900 miles southwest of Australia and is nearly 3 times the size of Japan. But don't bother trying to spot it on a world map, because to really see it, you'd have to dive deep. And I mean that literally, since big chunks of it now lie more than 6,000 feet under the ocean. Now, it wasn't always like this, though. For long stretches of time, large parts of the Kerguelen Plateau were above sea level, forming a huge microcontinent. That was roughly between 100 million and 20 million years ago. Back then, scientists think this land was covered in dense forests, packed with trees like araucarias and cypresses. But it wasn't exactly peaceful. Active volcanoes were everywhere, with lava flows probably spilling across the land. And not to mention the dinosaurs. There's some evidence that lizards and dinosaurs once lived there, but they were likely the smaller ones, not the big scary kind. Another cool theory is that the Kerguelen Plateau once acted like a long land bridge connecting Antarctica and India. People believe that for a long time, but more recent research suggests it's probably not true. Even back then, there were still huge stretches of open water separating these landmasses. But anyway, today the trees are gone, and those ancient volcanoes are quiet, hidden underwater. So, you might be wondering, how did this whole chunk of continent sink and basically disappear? Well, we'll get to that in a second. But first, we need to answer a basic question. How did the Kerguelen Plateau form in the first place? Well, our story starts about 130 million years ago. Back then, Earth had Gondwana, a giant supercontinent that included what are now South America, Africa, India, Australia, and Antarctica. But eventually, it began to break apart. And during that long, dramatic breakup that happened over millions of years, the Kerguelen Plateau was born. And it basically exists thanks to something called the Kerguelen Hotspot. The Kerguelen Hotspot is a region deep inside Earth where super hot melted rock slowly rises toward the surface. You can think of it like a steady underground burner, melting rock in the same spot for a very, very long time. And even though the hotspot stays put, Earth's outer shell keeps moving above it. So as the seafloor drifted over the Kerguelen hotspot, Huge amounts of melted rock spilled out, cooled down, and stacked up, layer after layer. Over about 30 million years, that process built a massive mound of volcanic rock on the ocean floor. At the peak of the eruptions, it may have added around 7 to 8 inches of lava every year. To put that into perspective, that's enough new lava to fill about 184,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, if there were that many. And little by little, that volcanic pile kept growing, bigger and bigger, higher and higher, until it finally rose above sea level and became the Kerguelen Plateau. But then, something strange happened. Over the last 20 million years, this landmass started to sink, slowly but steadily. Today, most of it sits roughly 3,300 to 6,600 feet below sea level, and only a couple of spots have managed to stay above water. One of them is the Kerguelen Islands, that French territory we mentioned earlier, and the other is the McDonald Islands, which belong to Australia. Okay, but how did all the rest of it sink? Well, continents don't end up underwater because they suddenly drop like stones. Instead, this process happens because Earth's surface slowly bends, stretches, and shifts over very long periods of time. The outer shell of the planet is broken into huge pieces, the tectonic plates. These plates float on a hotter, softer layer of rock beneath them, known as the mantle. When a continent gets pulled apart by forces deep inside Earth, its crust stretches out, gets thinner, so it starts to sit lower. And as it drops, the ocean doesn't come rushing in all at once. Instead, seawater slowly spills over the edges, flooding the lowest areas first and turning dry land into shallow seas. Meanwhile, the rock underneath cools down, and when it cools, it contracts and sinks, which pulls the surface down even more. On top of that, sediments keep piling up, almost like heavy blankets, adding extra weight and pushing the crust lower and lower. And that's basically what happened to the Kerguelen Plateau. Parts of it once rose above sea level and even had forests, but the sheer weight of all that basalt, along with shifting tectonic plates, gradually pushed it back down into the deep ocean. In the end, only the highest volcanic peaks stayed above water, and those are the islands we see today. Now, here's a big question. If most of it is underwater, can we still call it a continent? Well, in a way, yeah. In fact, scientists have described it as a microcontinent since the 1970s. And that's because what really separates continents from ocean basins isn't whether they're above water, it's the type of crust underneath. Earth basically has two main kinds of crust, rising and deep dish. Wait a minute, that's pizza crust. Oops. The Earth's crust comes in either continental or oceanic. Continents are made of continental crust. It's thicker, lighter, and usually much older, so it tends to sit higher and form land. It's also more granite-like in composition, formed from magma that cools slowly deep underground before it hardens. Then there's oceanic crust. That's what the ocean floor is made of. It's thinner, heavier, and much younger, so it sits lower and stays underwater. And it's mostly made of basalt, formed when rock in the Earth's mantle melts and rises up. Now here's where the Kerguelen Plateau gets really interesting. Even though the whole region is basically underwater, it isn't just normal ocean floor. And even though it's built from huge amounts of basalt, it doesn't behave like typical oceanic crust. Since this basalt was piled up over millions of years, the crust there became much thicker than normal oceanic crust. It also contains fragments of continental crust from the breakup of Gondwana. So that's basically why we consider it a continent. But you're not going to see the Kerguelen Plateau listed as one of Earth's main continents, just like Europe or Africa. And honestly, it's mostly because it would be a headache. A lot of people don't realize this, but the way we label continents is based more on convention than on one strict scientific rule. Because if we started teaching that the Kerguelen Plateau counts as a continent, we'd have to take a serious look at a bunch of other places too, like Zealandia, this almost completely submerged chunk of continental crust in Oceania. And it doesn't stop there. There's Beringia, Doggerland, Mauritia, Sahul, and Sunda, all regions that were once dry land or made of continental crust, but are now partly underwater. So, imagine if we started calling all of them continents. Earth would go from having 7 continents to what, 10, 12, more? It would get confusing fast. That's why the Kerguelen Plateau is usually described as a microcontinent or a sunken continent, not like a full continent, and certainly never an incontinent. That doesn't make it any less interesting, though. These days, the area is still volcanically active. The eruption rate dropped a lot over time and has stayed relatively low ever since, but the system is still going. And that's already pretty wild, because activity like this usually only lasts 1 to 5 million years. So, in a way, the Kerguelen Plateau behaves like one of Earth's longest-running supervolcano systems. And it's still not done. Now quick, how many continents are there on Earth? You'd probably say 7, I would. But honestly, this question doesn't have a right answer anymore. Technically, yes, Earth has 7 continents. But our geography books have been ignoring this whole part of the world. For years, scientists have been arguing that there's actually an 8th continent hiding out there, and it's called Zealandia. Turns out this lost continent isn't so lost anymore. A few years ago, researchers finally mapped out exactly where Zealandia is and how massive it really is. And that was a first, because Zealandia is nothing like the other continents. Think about it. Asia, Europe, Africa, you can spot them from space, or better yet, just look down at your feet. Right now, you are standing on a continent. But most people don't realize every continent on Earth has parts we can't step on, or even see. A lot of their land is hidden under the ocean, and those areas are tough to map or even explore. Now, imagine a continent that's 94% underwater. That'd be almost impossible to find, right? Well, that's Zealandia, a massive chunk of land located beneath the Pacific Ocean. And there's a reason for that. A long, long time ago, Zealandia was part of Gondwana, an ancient supercontinent that included South America, Africa, Antarctica, Australia, and parts of Asia. For millions of years, Gondwana held together until it started breaking apart about 200 million years ago. Its pieces slowly drifted in different directions, and one of them was Zealandia. At first, it was still connected to both Australia and Antarctica. But around 85 million years ago, Zealandia finally split off and began drifting on its own, becoming an isolated continent. Now, unlike Australia or Antarctica, Zealandia didn't stay on the surface for long. It sank. Today, only a small part of it sticks out above the ocean. That's mostly New Zealand, plus New Caledonia, and a few smaller Pacific islands. The rest is hidden under the sea. But hold on, how did Zealandia sink in the first place? For years, most experts thought Zealandia broke away in a process called a strike-slip breakup. That's when continents split apart along huge strike-slip fault zones, places where tectonic plates slide past each other side by side. But something about that theory never quite added up. After years of research, scientists think they have finally cracked the mystery. Turns out Zealandia's crust, or the outer shell of the continent, had been stretched thin. Yep, that's right. Instead of sliding sideways, like they once thought, the land was actually stretching and breaking. It's just like pulling a piece of dough until it gets so thin it finally tears. That's basically what happened to Zealandia. The land stretched so much it eventually snapped, and that happened because the tectonic plates beneath Zealandia were pulling apart, thinning the crust until it finally broke. And when it did, it cracked big time. The cracks were big enough for ocean water to rush in through the gaps, creating what we now know as the Tasman Sea. A few million years later, even more stretching left Zealandia's crust thinner and weaker. Eventually, it gave way, and huge parts of it sank beneath the waves, sealing its fate as a lost continent. But it wasn't all that lost. Experts had actually suspected its existence for almost 400 years, and the big clue was its unusual thickness. You see, Earth's crust comes in 2 main kinds. We've got continental crust and oceanic crust. They're both part of the planet's outer shell of solid rock, but there are some big differences between them. The continental crust is kind of like a Chicago deep dish pizza. It's thicker. The oceanic crust, on the other hand, is more like a New York slice, thinner. Now let's drop both slices into a tank of water and see what happens. Okay, let's just say the deep dish is lighter, so it floats. That's why continents sit above the ocean. The New York slice is heavier, so it sinks to the bottom of the tank. And that's why oceanic crust ends up lower, forming the ocean floor. There's another key difference too. Continental crust is made of lots of different types of rock, while oceanic crust is mostly basalt, that dark volcanic rock we get from eruptions. Knowing this, scientists used advanced technology to investigate the South Pacific. And what they found was surprising. Areas once thought to be ordinary ocean floor were actually basalt-free and much thicker than ocean crust should be. So wait, could our sunken New York-style pizza actually be a Chicago deep dish? Well, yeah. Even though Zealandia's crust is still thinner than other continents, it's way thicker than real oceanic crust, which means it's not just a patchwork of ocean floor and continental scraps. It's all continental crust, just a drowned version of it. In February 2017, scientists made the big announcement. Listen, everyone, Earth has 8 continents. Ta-da! But back then, they had no idea what Zealandia really looked like. There wasn't a map or anything, and that's probably why so many people still don't know it exists. Even inside the scientific community, not everyone was thrilled about calling it the 8th continent. Some people believe that the strange land at the bottom of the ocean was just a bunch of submerged fragments or microcontinents. Now here's the thing though, even before that big public announcement, an international team had already set sail on an expedition. They went near New Caledonia to collect seabed rock samples from North Zealandia, more precisely from Fairway Ridge in the Coral Sea. Fast forward 6 years, and those very samples unlocked a major discovery about Zealandia: its true size. The combination of rock dating methods, magnetic signatures, and tectonic mapping helped scientists define where Zealandia's boundaries lie. And they found that Zealandia has nearly 2 million square miles of landmass. To put that in perspective, that's about 20 times bigger than New Zealand. For many specialists, its size and completeness basically rule out the idea that Zealandia isn't a real continent. But why doesn't it feel official yet? I mean, we don't see it on maps, right? Well, that's because it's hard to get everyone to agree on calling it a continent. And the biggest reason people resist it so much might be pretty simple. It's just not convenient. You see, continents are generally identified by convention rather than by strict criteria. Depending on the perspective, people recognize 4, 5, 6, or 7 continents, because there's no such thing as a continent authority, and you are not going to see an international commission go on TV to name a new continent, or to make an official list of how many there are. Being almost entirely underwater doesn't help Zealandia's case. I mean, is it really fair to call it a continent like Asia or Africa? Some people argue that if Zealandia qualifies, then other smaller blocks of continental crust, like the Cocos Islands or other microcontinents, could also make the list. So, how many more continents would we have to add to the list? See why it's not very convenient? Maybe it's safer to call Zealandia a submerged or sunken continent. That's more accurate. Although, to be fair, the true definition of a sunken continent is still kind of fuzzy. But honestly, I wouldn't worry too much about the official definition of Zealandia. What really matters is that fully mapping it is already a big deal. Just keep in mind that large parts of it remain unexplored. Scientists are confident that technologies like seismic imaging and deep-sea drilling will uncover even more about its structure and history. And just because Zealandia is mostly underwater doesn't make it any less of a geological marvel. This sunken landmass actually preserves clues about Earth's past that we might never see on continents above the surface. It might help scientists understand how continents shift as the plates move around. They also hope to find more clues about how drifting continents affect sea level, climate patterns, and the distribution of plants and animals. Each new discovery could sharpen our understanding of how Earth's surface reshapes itself. So, continent or not, Zealandia has already changed how we see our planet. Hey, quick question. How many continents are there? 7? Maybe 5? There's no correct answer. According to different approaches, the range is between 4 to 7. But it might actually be as many as 8. Chances are, a lost continent has recently been found between Greenland and Canada. This new continent discovery could also potentially be the key to how microcontinents form. What does this all mean, and what makes this hidden landmass near Greenland so important? Now, if you're like me, and if you are, then there's two of us, when you hear the word continent, you probably think of land like Europe or Africa, places above water where people live. But in science, a continent isn't about being above sea level. It's about what the land is made of. Earth's outer layer, called the crust, comes in two main types, continental and oceanic. Continental one is thicker, lighter, and made of different types of rock, like granite. The oceanic crust is thinner, heavier, and made mostly of dark volcanic rock. Now, the discovery under the Davis Strait between Greenland and Canada appears to be a piece of continental landmass, even though it's under the ocean. Scientists call it a proto-microcontinent because it began to break off from a larger terrain millions of years ago, but never quite made it. As tectonic plates slowly shifted, the Earth's crust in this region stretched and cracked. One chunk started to split away, but for some reason, the process stopped. It didn't drift off like a full continent, and it didn't sink like ocean crust either. Instead, it stayed right there, floating beneath the waves all this time. This makes it different from true microcontinents, like Zealandia, which have completely detached and now exist as separate tectonic blocks. Zealandia is a submerged microcontinent near New Zealand. About 94% of it lies underwater, but because it's made of continental crust, many geologists say it qualifies as Earth's eighth continent. However, Zealandia is still debated because it's too big to be a microcontinent, and there's no official global body to define its status. There's no global organization like the UN or some kind of international geology council that can declare, hey, this is a new continent. Unlike Madagascar, which is fully above sea level and widely accepted by geologists as a classic example of a microcontinent, Zealandia is still waiting for a proper label. I know you're probably wondering, isn't Madagascar an island? The simple answer is, it's both. It's the fourth largest island in the world completely surrounded by water, but it's also geologically considered a microcontinent because it broke off from the supercontinent Gondwana around 88 million years ago and is made of continental crust, not oceanic crust. Unlike volcanic islands like Hawaii, this isn't just built from lava. It's a real piece of ancient continental crust. So Madagascar checks both boxes: island by geography, microcontinent by geology. And that's exactly why these discoveries can be fascinating. Just like Madagascar stands out above the waves, this newly discovered landmass under the Davis Strait stands out beneath them, thanks to its unusual structure. What makes it stand out is its unusual thickness. Most of the ocean floor is thin, like metal. This is more like packed clay, layered with continental materials. Underneath this cozy comforter, scientists discovered some odd layers of rock, unusual because they're not where they should be. These layers act more like the materials found on continents rather than those typically seen on ocean floors. There are hints of granite-like formations and distinct magnetic properties, which suggest that this stuff is similar to what makes up dry land. The size is also remarkable. The proto-microcontinent is about 12 to 15 miles across, which makes it roughly the size of a mid-sized city, like Manhattan Island that's 6,500 feet underwater. The fact that it sits right under the Davis Strait, one of the widest ocean passages on Earth, makes it one of the largest submerged continental fragments we've found. According to researchers, this landmass began to form between 58 and 49 million years ago, when Greenland and Canada were slowly drifting apart. Maybe they just weren't getting along. Hey, it happens. As they pulled apart, the crust under the Davis Strait stretched, and one of the main fault lines shifted. But the breakup didn't finish. Around 48 million years ago, the rifting stalled and Greenland's motion away from Canada slowed dramatically when it later bumped into Ellesmere Island. It's like a car swerving off and then back onto the freeway, a turn that was never completed. That's basically what happened. A chunk of land got stuck between the motion. It didn't float off into the ocean like a new continent, and it didn't get pulled down into the Earth either. It just stayed where it was, stranded beneath the water. But that's not all. This chunk has its own fault system, and scientists say it actually looks like a miniature version of the San Andreas Fault in California. Now, a fault is basically a crack in the Earth's crust where sections of rock slide past each other. Think of it as a place where the Earth's surface split and tried to slide sideways. In California, this movement still happens today and can cause earthquakes. But under the Davis Strait, it's a different story. The movement started, then suddenly stopped, like hitting pause in the middle of a big shift. It's a frozen moment in the planet's past, preserved right beneath the waves. For geologists, that makes the microcontinent under Davis Strait incredibly valuable. That sudden pause in motion helps explain why some chunks of land break away cleanly, while others twist, stall, or disappear. But this isn't just academic. By studying how continents break apart or stall, scientists can better predict future shifts in land, fault lines, and seismic activity. And predicting earthquakes and geological hazards could prove quite valuable to everyone. Knowing how microcontinents form could help us anticipate how the planet's surface might shift over millions of years, which affects everything from climate models to resource availability. But even just the technological advancement needed for such discoveries is greatly beneficial. The same tools used to map this hidden land are used for oil exploration, laying undersea cables, climate monitoring, and even search and rescue missions. Speaking of technology, for a long time, this hidden landmass near Greenland remained invisible. Just 10 or 15 years ago, the ocean floor under the Davis Strait was basically a mystery. It's deep, almost frozen, obviously not the easiest place to explore. But today, thanks to modern tools, a new continent discovery could be just a matter of time. Scientists can finally see and hear what's going on under all that water. First, they use seismic reflection imaging. That's a method where ships send sound waves down to the ocean floor and record how they bounce back. Various layers of rock reflect sounds in different ways, which helps build a picture of what's hidden underneath. It's kind of like how bats use echoes to see in the dark. Satellites also play a role in collecting gravity data. This may sound strange, but different types of rocks have slightly different weights. Heavier rocks create stronger gravitational pull, and satellites can measure those tiny differences. Another tool commonly used for these explorations is underwater sensors, which sit quietly on the seafloor and listen for natural vibrations, like mini earthquakes or shifts in rock. These vibrations help scientists figure out what the crust is made of and how thick it is. They're basically ears on the ocean floor. They also most likely used AUVs, or autonomous underwater vehicles, basically robot submarines that can scan the seafloor in high resolution, even under thick ice. In any case, scientists are very excited because this new continent discovery is more than just a geological surprise. It's what they call a natural laboratory. The study of the microcontinent Davis Strait offers a rare opportunity to understand how microcontinents form, evolve, and sometimes fail to fully separate. It also reminds us that Earth's crust isn't as neatly divided as we once thought. Beneath the ocean, there may be other hidden landmasses near Greenland or elsewhere, almost continents just waiting to be found. This lost continent of Canada may not have made it as a fully fledged landmass, but its discovery is already reshaping how we view plate tectonics. And thanks to advances in technology, places we once ignored are now offering up secrets about the planet's deep past, and maybe even its future. New Zealand is located in the Southwest Pacific, and it isn't just a country of mountains, the world's quirkiest creatures, and hobbit holes. But here's another cool fact. New Zealand sits on top of a hidden continent that's 94% underwater. That's right, just the tip of a sunken landmass more than half the size of Australia. And with sea levels rising, one question keeps, surfacing. Is it possible that all these remarkable creatures will need swimming lessons one day? Zealandia is a sprawling, drowned continent stretching from New Zealand to New Caledonia. This underwater region has mountains, valleys, and its own geological personality. But wait, how can something underwater be called a continent? Well, it turns out being underwater doesn't disqualify you from being a continent. It just makes you harder to spot. Most people think of continents as giant land masses you can walk on. But geologists don't define continents by what's above water. They define them by what they're made of. You see, most of Earth's crust is oceanic, thin, dense, and made of basalt. However, continents sit on continental crust, which is thicker, lighter, and much older. That's the case with Zealandia. Even though it's mostly submerged, it's composed of the same kind of crust as Australia or South America. It has mountain ranges, sediment basins, fault lines — it's not your fault — and even fossils that prove it once had forests and land creatures. Zealandia was above sea level during the age of dinosaurs, and while we haven't found a raptor-like theropod skeleton yet, there's no reason to believe we won't. So how was this discovery made? Since most of Zealandia sits about 1/2 to 1.5 miles underwater, it wasn't easy. We can't drain the region like a bathtub just to take a look. So the answer had to be technology. Scientists used satellites to calculate tiny changes in Earth's gravity to spot what was hiding under the waves. Yep, fun fact, there are satellites that can measure gravity now. For example, NASA's mission GRACE has 2 satellites that find small changes in Earth's gravity. It does this by measuring how far apart the satellites are as they move over different things. Scientists also use sonar to map out the underwater mountains and valleys in 3D. Finally, deep ocean drilling pulled up ancient rock, soil, and even land-based fossils from beneath the seafloor. Physical proof that this wasn't just the ocean floor. Not that scientists use all this tech in that exact order, like following steps on a checklist. It actually took decades of overlapping data from land, sea, and space to connect the dots. By the early 2000s, enough evidence had piled up that some geologists began to speak openly about a possible hidden continent. Still, it wasn't until 2017 that Zealandia was formally proposed as one, backed by clear geological criteria. And in 2023, after decades of mapping and research, Zealandia became the first continent to be fully mapped while almost entirely underwater. But why did it sink in the first place? Long ago, all of Earth's land was joined in a single supercontinent called Pangea. Around 200 million years ago — yeah, I wasn't around then — it began to split apart. The northern half became Laurasia, which included what is now North America, Europe, and most of Asia. The southern half became Gondwana, made up of present-day South America, Africa, Antarctica, Australia, India, and Zealandia. About 85 million years ago, Zealandia broke off from Gondwana. It used to be connected to Australia and Antarctica, but when it split, its crust became too thin and stretched out. That made it less sturdy and more prone to sinking. You can think of it like a piece of ice that floats lower in the water after it breaks off a bigger chunk. Over time, tectonic forces, like plate movement and the loss of its deeper support, caused most of it to sink. It didn't just sink because it was weak, but because it was pulled down by Earth's shifting plates. It settled lower into the mantle because it didn't have the structure to stay higher up. Today, only the highest ridges, like New Zealand, remain above water. That's kind of cool to think about. If Zealandia had never sunk, Wellington would be somewhere up to 9,800 feet high. That's higher than Aspen, Colorado. Now, we know New Zealand is packed with weird and wonderful animals: birds that can't fly, bugs that glow, sheep that outnumber people. But what about its underwater world? Is it just as special? Actually, yeah. And honestly, maybe even cooler. Zealandia's sunken edges are home to marine life that's just as unique and isolated as the wildlife on land. We're talking thousands of species that evolved in near total obscurity, tucked away on a submerged continental shelf. Think of it as Earth's secret underwater lab. This is all thanks to diverse temperatures and over 50 different habitats in coastal regions alone. Take fish, for example. Some are delicious. But around 300 species found in these waters are endemic, meaning if you don't live near New Zealand, you'll never see them. This cute little fish is called southern lemon sole, and it stands out with its asymmetrical, pancake-like body and the odd habit of burying itself almost completely in sand, leaving just its eyes poking out. And the deeper you go, the stranger it gets. Zealandia's underwater slopes and canyons have creatures that feel like they were designed during a power outage at the Evolution Lab. My favorite is carnivorous sponges. Yep, sponges that eat meat. There are also sea daisies, which are small, flat, round creatures that don't seem to fit neatly into any specific family of animals. Scientists have discovered these unique little animals hanging onto sunken wood more than half a mile deep in the ocean. They're so unusual that researchers almost created a separate category just for them in the echinoderm family tree, which includes other marine life like starfish and sea urchins. And then there's the New Zealand scamping, a lobster-like crustacean that lives in muddy burrows on the ocean floor. This creature snacks on jelly-like blobs, ghost sharks, and pretty much anything that floats by. Even seaweeds are unique there, although they're not as cool as predatory sponges. Oh, by the way, an interesting fact about the regions close to New Zealand is that they hide active underwater volcanoes. The most famous one is called Brothers Seamount. It's located about 210 miles northeast of New Zealand. It's a massive underwater volcano with a crater at the top, constantly bubbling with heat and chemicals. What makes it fascinating is that these vents, called black smokers, support ecosystems that don't rely on sunlight. Instead, bacteria use chemicals like sulfur to produce energy, a process called chemosynthesis. These bacteria form the base of a food chain that includes species like tube worms and deep-sea shrimp, which are adapted to survive in extreme heat, pressure, and complete darkness. That's not typical for most ocean life, which depends on photosynthesis and stable conditions. Brothers Seamount is also loaded with metals like copper and zinc, making it scientifically valuable and, potentially, commercially tempting. So it goes without saying that Zealandia is incredibly important to scientists. It offers a unique window into Earth's geological and biological history. It's like a time machine and a natural lab that helps scientists piece together Earth's history. So, in the end, could New Zealand end up underwater due to water levels rising naturally with each century? If you're imagining New Zealand slowly disappearing beneath the waves, like a real-life Atlantis myth, don't. Even with sea levels rising, that kind of full-on submersion just isn't likely, even in the worst-case scenario. New Zealand's tallest point, Mount Aoraki, stands over 12,000 feet above sea level. For the ocean to cover that, it would need to rise by more than 2 miles. And unless Earth suddenly turns into a water balloon, that's not happening. Okay, but what about sinking? Could it sink like Zealandia did? Zealandia sank because it had a thin, stretched-out crust. It didn't have the strength to stay up. But New Zealand? It's sitting on the sturdy, lifted backbone of the continent. In fact, thanks to tectonic plate collisions, parts of it are actually rising every year. And not just rising, shaking too. Zealandia has active tectonic plate boundaries, which is why the region gets so many earthquakes and volcanic events. So, while Zealandia may be almost entirely underwater, New Zealand is holding its ground, literally. In other words, the Kiwi won't need swimming lessons anytime soon.